Damien died as a nameless soldier in a forgotten war. He lost his comrades, lost his future, and spent his life drowning in regret. But the moment he took his final breath, he opened his eyes again. Only this time he was 17 years in the past. His mana core was still perfect. And with every memory from the battlefield still inside his head, Damien no longer plans to just survive. This time, he will dominate the battlefield. The story begins by introducing us to a warrior who says that certain memories never fade away. One of those memories is the first time he had to eliminate an opponent on the battlefield, and the moment he single-handedly defeated over 2,000 enemies in a single fight. With his injuries, his vision starts to get blurry and everything becomes hazy. Then after a long confrontation, the fighter finally collapses on the ground. After that, the scene completely changes, taking us to a calmer and brighter place. There we see a boy being told that his parents' inheritance will now be taken care of by his uncle. Next, a man with glasses asks the boy to sign some papers after reviewing them. At this point, the boy's name is revealed as Damien, and he looks at the documents with suspicion. The two men then pressure him to sign quickly without needing to read what is written. His relative tries to calm him down, promising to return everything when he reaches adulthood. The boy grips the papers because that was the day his life was turned upside down. But to everyone's surprise, he tears up the documents and demands the money go to an account in his name. With the boy's uncle is completely shocked by his nephew's unexpected attitude. Damien also adds that no one will be able to withdraw the money without his explicit permission. His eyes show an unusual determination for someone his age. Seeing the whole situation, his uncle clenches his fist in pure anger. At that moment, the man grabs the young boy by the collar and starts yelling at him furiously. The boy just smiles and says he was worried his uncle might have changed. Before the older man can finish speaking, he gets hit with a punch to the face. Fallen on the ground, Damien thanks him for still being the same trash he remembered. The man with glasses who was watching everything is completely terrified by the scene. Stuttering with fear, he agrees to add the special terms that Damien demanded. The protagonist reflects that when he was 13 in the past, he could not do anything, but he smiles confidently because now things will be different since he went back in time. After that, the scene returns to the battlefield in the middle of the night. The warrior looks at the fallen fighters on the ground and curses the situation he got himself into. He remembers warning everyone that it was a reckless operation. Damien then wonders how 100 soldiers could defeat a force of 2,000 men. His memory ends with him shouting in pure despair and exhaustion in the middle of the war. The camera focuses on his eye as he struggles to breathe in the middle of the battle. The fighter remembers a fallen comrade who smiled even in his final moments. His friend said the operation was a success and said goodbye with an apology. With a heavy heart, Damien regrets not being strong enough to save everyone. In a fit of fury and frustration, he punches the ground, cursing his fate. The warrior then feels a sharp pain and realizes he is also heavily wounded. With a tired look, he accepts the fact that his time is coming to an end. With no more strength to continue, his helmet falls rolling across the stone floor. Fallen on the defeated, the soldier feels his thoughts mixed before the end. He asks himself if he would have had a different life if he had joined the military earlier. And with his last breath, the man wishes for one more chance to fix his mistakes. At that moment, he remembers a time when he fought with all his vigor and power. Damien thinks he could have dominated the battlefield alongside his allies. But now it was too late for regrets, and he was sure he was passing on. However, the young man wakes up in his bed and realizes he somehow returned to the past. Lying there confused, he understands it was not a dream and he really went back 17 years. The boy looks at his young hands without battle calluses and stays silent. Then he lifts his shirt to check his mana core located in his abdomen. Unlike his path, his core is intact and now he can master mana. Damien recalls that before his uncle stole his inheritance and he survived on odd jobs. And like an abandoned orphan, he took the blame for a crime and went to prison. After that, the young man was forced to enlist and was dragged into the war. Back then, the boy thought his miserable life had finally ended, but to his surprise, someone like him managed to become a respected centurion. He reflects that in the end, he ended up meeting his fate anyway. Suddenly, his eyes open wide as his soldier instincts are activated. Sensing the presence of an intruder, he quickly jumps out of bed on high alert. The boy grabs a hidden dagger as someone opens his bedroom door. A hooded figure sneaks in without knowing what awaits inside. Then, to the intruder's surprise, Damien jumps toward him with the dagger in hand. With his dagger, Damien manages to strike one of the intruders, who cries out in pain. The boy complains that the blade only went halfway, and while his arm gets hurt, seeing his wounded companion, the other attacker gets up and swears to take the boy down. But the young man dodges the man's attack with impressive agility. The invader then lunges once more to try and hit the boy with everything he has. However, the protagonist manages to block the strike using his own dagger. The force of the impact makes him cough, and he realizes his small body puts him at a disadvantage. Even so, with an intimidating look, he asks who sent them there. Next, we see the two attackers fallen on the ground and groaning in pain. Damien then grabs one of them by the collar, demanding answers to his questions. He asks directly if Pucker was the one responsible for sending the two mercenaries. With a scary aura, the young man repeats the question much more aggressively. Suddenly, a new voice says the boy is quite terrifying for a kid. A white-haired man appears and asks if he introduced himself as Mookmen. Recognizing the name, the protagonist seems to better understand the situation he is in. Without a second thought, he finishes the attacker he was holding on the ground. With a smile on his face, the boy realizes something he had not understood before. A memory from 17 years ago shows the dark alleys of the city. In his past, the young man was dragged away and now finds it strange to have been captured so quickly. He remembers being beaten and mistreated by those people. The boy then begins to wonder if all of that was planned from the very beginning, and realizes it was all Pucker's plan to take his money and get rid of him. Back in the present, the young man finishes dealing with the second intruder once and for all. Now in his room, Demian stands amid the two fallen attackers. He gets furious, understanding that his own uncle sold him out to thugs in the past. Mookman watches the entire scene with a slight smile and a look of interest. In the blink of an eye, the operative lunges to attack the boy with his sword, but to the man's surprise, the boy manages to dodge by sliding across the floor. The newcomer is shocked to see that a child was able to avoid his strike. With a confident smile, Demian asks himself if Mookman was always this weak. During the fight, he reveals he has a special ability that helps him dodge attacks. He says that after countless battles and almost losing his life multiple times, he learned to predict movements. With this, the boy can read the twisting of the waist and even his opponent's shoulder movements. So this ability allows him to see exactly where his enemies are aiming. Mookman is completely shocked to see a child manage to predict his attack. The attacker calls him a rat and lunges once more, but Demian finds the strike predictable. To the assailant's surprise, the boy blocks the sword and breaks it with his bare hands. With the impact, the man's weapon shatters and falls to the ground in several pieces. Taking advantage of the opening, Demian lands a solid punch right in his opponent's face. Mookman gets furious and curses the boy while recovering from the unexpected blow. The operative steps back coughing and realizes he was heavily injured by the counterattack. He cannot believe a simple brat was able to do all that. Without giving the man time to react, the young man attacks him with his dagger and knocks him down. Fallen and in shock, Mookman thinks that boy is definitely only 13 years old. While tearing a piece of his shirt, Demian asks if he wants to know how he defended himself. The boy explains he can predict everything just by watching the lifting of an arm. The attacker is terrified and says that makes no sense at all. Demian then threatens him with the dagger, saying he can believe whatever he wants. Mookman tries to intimidate him, stating he is not the only one and others will come after him. The boy mocks him because the man will not be able to spread rumors if he does not leave there walking. He calls him clever and asks once more if it was Pucker who sent him. The operative stays silent, thinking about what he should do in that situation. The young man threatens him, telling him to answer if he does not want to spend the rest of his life crippled. With a sweaty face, the man is terrified by the boy's glare. In his thoughts, he wonders how a 13-year-old boy can have a look like that. Mookman then confesses it was Pucker and the order was to bring him back barely breathing. Confused by Demi's response, the attacker asks what he meant by that. Suddenly, a cut appears on his neck and he falls to the floor in his final moments. As the man passes on, the protagonist says he needs to clean up the mess before leaving. With a serious look, he states he has to tidy everything up before moving forward. The boy reflects that one of the few things he learned is that you should avoid making enemies. But as he approaches the door, he completes his thought on the matter. And with the image of the fallen men, he concludes an enemy must be completely overcome. Then the scene shifts to an isolated house in the middle of a forest at night. There, a hooded man looks at his watch and believes the job must be done by now. In an office, Pucker is worried, but the man tells him not to fuss over anything. The newcomer mocks him, saying he must be really annoyed to call him in for a brat. Angry, the boy's uncle slams the desk, remembering the punch he took earlier. The leader of the operatives asks him to wait and warns him not to take it out on his payment. With an imposing posture, the hooded man watches his client sweating cold from nerves. Suddenly, he senses a presence and says the boy has arrived, making Pucker even more tense. The boy's uncle swears that as soon as he settles the insurance contract, his nephew will be gone. The operative wonders why his men are taking so long, and the door is pierced. A spear flies past him and the man asks himself if his subordinates failed the mission. Demian walks in carrying the weapon, and when asked, he confirms his name and calls him a lackey. The hooded man is surprised by the insult and repeats the word in a doubtful tone. The boy then explains he is the lackey of the greedy guy sitting right behind him. Hearing the boy's audacity, the mercenary cannot hold back and bursts into laughter. He turns to Pucker and calls him by name with a very threatening tone of voice. To the man's astonishment, the mercenary warns that the commission fee will be tripled. He justifies it by saying his team took a heavy hit, so it is only fair to raise the price. A vision shows Demian's battle-worn spear after the fight in his room. The protagonist appears with a dark and imposing aura holding his weapon. The operative leader narrates there seems to have been an unexpected variable in the plan. Then the images of the fight against his subordinates confirm this suspicion. Even so, the boy's uncle complains indignantly that tripling the price is absurd. The mercenary shrugs and says goodbye, but Pucker desperately asks him to wait. The heavy man looks at the operative on one side and his nephew on the other. Upon seeing Demian's cold and threatening glare, his uncle lets out a scream of terror. In a panic, he agrees to pay triple because he knows he is done for if left alone there. With the negotiations settled, Montel draws his sword and prepares for combat. The mercenary says he does not care about his men, because to him it is all just business, but Demian replies he does care because those scoundrels ruined his life. He remembers spending half his life rotting in alleys like trash, and it was during that time he ended up destroying his own mana core to survive. So the boy says he will not forgive him and he should just accept his fate. Model calls him an arrogant brat and the two charge at each other for the fight. The young man's spear goes straight for his more experienced opponent's legs. The attacker realizes the boy's intention to aim for a low point on his body. Demian then confirms to himself that this man is no ordinary opponent. Their speed is so great that the scenery around them seems to distort with their movement. In the blink of an eye, the two fighters exchange strikes and defend simultaneously. With great skill, the mercenary prepares to use all his strength in the next attack. The protagonist narrates that the moment he protects his face, he will strike another spot. His strategy was to use the spear as bait so he could tear his opponent's thigh. But the operative reveals a hidden blade and believes he has the upper hand in the fight. The young man widens his eyes upon seeing the dagger in the hooded man's other hand. Model then charges with his secret weapon, thinking this is his real attack. However, to his surprise, the strike does not have the effect he expected. The boy explains predicting the sword attack in his right hand was quite easy. Then with a quick movement, the boy hits the mercenary with the other end of the spear. Demian looks up with an air of superiority and says he already knew everything. Fallen and defeated, the man grits his teeth and curses the brat who beat him. With his last breath, he tries to yell he will take the boy down, but he cannot. His eyes widen in despair as his energy quickly fades away. With the final impact of the spear, the operative finally passes and falls defeated to the floor. Demian watches him and thinks that although he was strong, he was nothing but alley trash. With the fight over, the young man turns to the last problem he needs to solve there. Seeing the scene, Pucker falls to his knees and stutters his nephew's name, begging him to listen. But the boy simply ignores his pleas and walks toward him without saying a word. In complete despair, Pucker crawls on the floor, begging his nephew not to come closer. The scene ends with a view of the house fading into the distance as screams echo through the night. Sometime later, a bank teller informs Demian the money has been deposited. The first thing the boy did after handling everything was collect the insurance payout. With the papers signed, the man thanks him for his trust and hopes to work with him again. Before the young man leaves, the teller asks where he is heading now. He mentions the carriage the boy arrived and looked ready for a long journey. Demian then reveals he is planning to enlist in the military, leaving the man confused. He confirms it and says he needs to meet some people as the carriage departs. Inside the vehicle, the boy looks out the window with a serious and thoughtful expression. With a slight smile, he thinks his comrades are out there and his place is in the military. The boy knows in 5 years everything will change and many youths will be forcibly drafted. An era of inevitable conflict is approaching and no one will be able to escape their fate. Since the incident that damaged his mana core did not happen, he can prepare himself. So instead of enlisting late at 25, it is better to volunteer now. His plan is to go to the capital, train for 1 week, and then sign up at the boot camp. Looking at the landscape, he decides this time he will not be dragged down by the era. With a determined look, he states instead he will rule it, and the scene moves forward 1 week. Arriving at his destination, we see a large castle with several towers and walls. In the training courtyard, a spear with purple mana hits the target with precision. Other soldiers comment on the boy's skill and wonder where he learned that. Demian continues his training, hitting the dummies hard and showing his mastery with the weapon. He looks at his bruised hands and thinks his body is still too weak. His current hands look nothing like the ones full of coluses he had in the future. A man approaches and asks if he is there to sign up as a trainee. The instructor praises his spear technique and asks where he learned it. The technique's name might sound silly, but it is the most common style used by soldiers. To cover it up, the boy lies, saying his late father taught him how to fight. He adds his father was proud to serve and influenced him to enlist. The instructor tries to explain that was not the intention of his question. The man then clears his throat and more seriously asks what the young man's name is. Standing tall, the boy answers his name is Demian and introduces himself formally. The instructor smiles and places a hand on his shoulder, wishing him luck on the test. Demian thanks him and watches the man walk up the stairs and away from the area. Alone in the courtyard, he feels the mana flowing from his core and gathering in his hand. The boy places his hand on his stomach, feeling the powerful energy he now possessed. With a confident smile, he creates a mana sphere and celebrates being able to use it again. He looks at the purple energy in his hand, amazed by the familiar sensation. The feeling of power he had not felt in a long time fills him with hope. With a victorious smile, the boy celebrates the fact he can finally use mana again. He remembers the mana cultivation method developed 15 years in the future. In his past life with his destroyed mana core, he desperately memorized that technique. A flashback shows his old comrades mocking him for studying something he could not use. Back then, he would get furious at the teasing, but could not do anything about it. Back in the present, he thinks the effort was not in vain, and now he just needs to pass the exam. With a determined look, the young man prepares for the challenges ahead. Walking through the courtyard, he remembers an important person also trained at that camp. A blue-haired silhouette appears, and Demian wonders how he is doing now. The scene shows the training grounds with several recruits getting ready for the test. The first challenge candidates must face is lifting a large rock. Although it sounds simple, lifting a boulder over 30 kilos is no easy task. Without difficulty, Demian lifts the rock above his head, and the instructor announces he passed. He thinks with his 1-star mana that test was not challenging at all. With the first test over, the candidates gather for the next phase of the exam. A blonde man then announces they will start the second admission test. The next trial will be a long-distance run with a time limit of 1.5 hours. The instructor explains minor collisions like bumping into each other are allowed during the race. However, attacking other candidates is forbidden and Demian suspects they're undercover instructors. The man also warns that leaving the designated track will result in immediate disqualification. With a mischievous smile, the boy thinks this test will definitely be a lot of fun. The second test begins with the candidates lined up on a dirt track. While stretching, Demian notices another boy from his group approaching him. The blonde-haired boy calls him and says he has been keeping an eye on him for a while. The protagonist asks why and then recognizes that face from somewhere. With a smile, the blonde boy asks if he is serious about not knowing the reason. In a whisper, he reveals he knows the red-haired boy is using mana. The boy explains commoners normally only learn mana if they have special backing. At that, Demian begins to remember who he is and the blonde asks his name. The boy introduces himself as Appel and the protagonist is shocked because he knows him from the future. Appel is a legend who became a general and count at 30 a hero to the commoners. The future hero says he was bored and suggests they give it their best in the test. Demian agrees and shakes his hand, thinking it is best not to cause friction with him. Then the instructor yells for everyone to get ready for the start of the race. At the signal, the candidates dash at high speed down the dirt track. Everyone runs together in a large group at the beginning of the endurance trial. A group of muscular men takes the lead and the others wonder what is going on. The protagonist explains to Appel that this is the Wailing Wall, the real challenge of the exam. The blonde suggests following them and passing them at the end, but Demian has other plans. He says that style does not suit him and dashes ahead with a burst of mana. Seeing his new friend speed, Appel is left completely wide-jawed. Meanwhile, the disguised instructors agree to keep pace and speed up at the end. One of them is thinking about the strategy when he notices strange movement behind him. He sees Demian approaching and wonders what that crazy kid is doing. His partner says to give the rookie a scare, but without really hurting him. The man smiles, thinking of his steel shoulders, and promises to try to be gentle. But before he can do anything, the boy places a hand on his back and says, "Excuse me." To everyone's surprise, the protagonist uses the instructor as leverage and leaps over the group. He flies right over everyone and keeps running at high speed. The head instructor yells for his men to stop that boy immediately. Demian runs alone, thinking that despite being skilled, the instructors are not invincible. He figures at the end of the day they are just boot camp instructors. Appel starts laughing at his new friend's audacity and the other candidates are shocked. With a determined smile, the blonde boy says he cannot fall behind either. Using his mana, he dashes at high speed to catch up with Demian up front. The other candidates are confused but decide to follow his lead and use the same tactic. Suddenly, the track becomes pure chaos with everyone running and jumping all over the place. The instructors left behind just hear the desperate shouts of their colleagues. They comment there seems to be a strange rookie and wonder if they should send backup. A man named Raymond arrives and tells them to leave things as they are. He explains if they interfere, they will be admitting the exam as rigged. Furthermore, the ability to use others to advance is also a form of skill. With a smile, he thinks his eyes did not deceive him and that boy is special. Raymond notes Demian's actions inspired the others to move as well. He reflects those who lead on the battlefield are the ones who know how to light that fire. Meanwhile, a panning candidate celebrates being on his 29th lap out of 30. He pushes himself to complete the final lap of the long-distance race. Suddenly, Appel catches up to him and calls his name, looking much calmer. The blonde boy comments he still looks full of energy and asks if it was all planned. Demian replies if they could not use mana, they would have ended up exhausted like the others. With a smile, he says if you have an ace up your sleeve, there's no reason not to use it. Appel laughs and calls him an interesting guy, agreeing with his logic. The protagonist then says the same goes for him and the two run side by side. At the end of the race, the instructor announces both boys passed the test. In an office, a man is informed an interesting boy has entered the boot camp. His subordinate says instructor Raymond contacted him and the boy is only 13 years old. The man with the eye patch thinks if the strict Raymond found him interesting, he must be special. He admits he became a bit curious to know more about the young recruit. With an air of authority, he asks what the name of the boy who caught his attention was again. In the castle courtyard, the exam results are displayed on a large board. Some candidates lament having failed while others celebrate passing. Seeing the others' joy, Demian wonders if this is really a reason for so much happiness. He remembers during the war the draft was mandatory and everyone tried to avoid it. Thinking about this, the young man concludes the current times are still quite peaceful. Suddenly, Appel calls him and congratulates him, saying they are now squad mates. The blonde boy confirms he saw his name on the list of those who passed the exam. He points to the board and shows Demian's name is at the top of the list. Appel says he hopes to work with him, and the protagonist replies the feeling is mutual. Since they have a week until enlistment, the blonde asks what he is going to do. Demian answers he has a few things to sort out during this free week. The future hero asks what he needs to do, and the boy says nothing too important. The blonde boy reminds him combat boots are stiff and suggests buying insoles. The protagonist already knows this from personal experience, but thanks him for the tip anyway. Appel smiles and tells him not to worry because that is what friends are for. Demian then asks about his plans, and the young blonde says he also has things to do. With a curious expression, the boy ponders what his friend is up to. He says goodbye and walks away while the future hero waves and wishes him luck. Appel watches him walk away with a smile and a hooded figure approaches. An older man asks who that was and the boy replies his name is Alan. The young blonde watches Demian from afar and wonders why he is trying to enlist. He says judging by the amount of mana the boy uses he is no ordinary person. Demian jokes if that is his way of showing off and Apple chuckles awkwardly. The protagonist then says the military is the only place for him without giving more details. The future hero understands he has his reasons and does not push the subject any further. He just tells Alan he has a feeling he will be seeing that young man for a long time. Then he drops the subject and his servant informs him the carriage is ready. The boy scolds him for calling him young master in public as he had requested. Alan apologizes and the two walk together across the boot camp courtyard. The scene shifts to a large bustling city with several buildings and people. Demian walks the streets and thinks he can barely believe what he is seeing. He observes the market and remembers the capital of his memory was quite different. In his mind he sees a bleak future with starving people begging for food in the streets. He knows the city's lively atmosphere will completely change in 5 years. To prepare, the boy's first step is to find the Work Merchant Guild. Demian is aware that with the war artifacts, weapons, and rations will be the most valuable goods. And naturally the merchant guilds will play a crucial role throughout the conflict. A flashback shows him in the future hearing the richest guild on the continent was Work. In the middle of a desert camp, he and his comrades wait for supplies. One of his men warns him the relief supplies are arriving at the location. In the distance they see a caravan approaching and recognize the Work Guild banner. A soldier complains that while they fight the merchants just keep getting richer. The protagonist scolds him, reminding him without their wheat and weapons they would all be gone. The man agrees and says he is just bitter about the war situation. Demian thinks even so it is not easy to consistently fund charity work. He then orders everyone to grab their supplies and get ready to move out. The red-haired boy watches the movement of soldiers and guild members in the camp. One of his subordinates approaches and points to the Work Guild master. He points out a man in a white tunic standing in front of the supply caravan. The soldier comments he looks like a completely arrogant jerk by his posture. Back in the present, Demian walks through the city streets looking for the guild. He knows they were already doing charity work even before the war began. Out of the 40 guilds in the capital, he figures he can narrow the search down to just 7. His strategy is to start looking for the ones that have the capital to do charity. The scene shows a beautiful mountain landscape with the sun setting on the horizon. After a long day of searching, he sighs and wonders if this is the last one on his list. The boy opens the door and asks if there is anyone there to help him at the moment. A man approaches and politely asks how he can help him at the guild. Demian says he heard the Hamel Guild does charity and came to discuss an investment. The man praises his noble mindset and the protagonist thinks he needs to confirm his suspicions. In a room, the guild master introduces himself as Work and the boy is surprised. He finally found who he was looking for and formally introduces himself to the man. Sitting at the table, the boy asks an indiscreet question and wants to know if the man has a son. The guild master laughs and says no, but he has a somewhat immature daughter at home. Demian is surprised and wonders if this is also a false lead in his search. He leans back in his chair, frustrated by the lack of progress in his plan. Suddenly, a female voice announces her arrival, and the protagonist turns his head amazed. A young blonde woman walks in and the boy recognizes her from the future, realizing he finally found her. Her father introduces her as Deal and says Demian is there to invest in their charity work. The young woman then approaches and greets the young investor with a charming smile. She asks if he is really interested in investing, and the boy confirms his intention. The protagonist is confused because he remembered the guild boss was a man, but she looks very similar. He wonders if the pretty face he remembered was because it was actually a woman. Deal pulls him out of his thoughts, asking how much he intends to invest in the project. The boy says he wants to make an initial investment of 300 gold coins. The young woman and her father are shocked by the amount and ask if he is serious. The man then wants to know what Demian wants in return since it is an investment. With a smile, the young man reveals he wants shares in the guild and a cut of the profits. The guild master is impressed by the boldness of such a young boy making such a proposal. Suspicious, he asks where all that money the boy possessed came from. The protagonist explains it is his parents' inheritance and he wishes to use it for a good cause. The man accepts the explanation and apologizes for the question, but Demian says he understands. To wrap up, the merchant says he needs a meeting and will give his answer later. After the boy leaves, the daughter asks her father why he has such a serious look on his face. He comments it is incredible for a 13-year-old boy to have such a bold attitude. But remembering the young man's eyes, he concludes he is no ordinary child. The father then laments if the young man were 5 years older, he would be the perfect match for her. With a red face, the young woman yells at her father, embarrassed by the comment. She tells him to stop, but the man jokes maybe the boy likes older girls. Time passes, and after the agreement with the guild, enlistment day finally arrives. In front of the barracks, the boy thinks this is the true fresh start of his new life. He raises his hand to the sky, determined to live a completely different life this time. With a fierce look, he clenches his fist and swears this time he will swallow the entire empire. Arriving at the barracks, he wonders if his unit is the first platoon of the 3rd company. He looks around and sees no familiar faces, wondering if Upal went to a different platoon. The boy feels disappointed because the blonde boy was the only one his age, and he throws his bag on the bed. Suddenly, a loud voice welcomes the new recruits, leaving Demian confused. A muscular man introduces himself as Brian, the leader of the unit's 1st platoon. He announces he is going to start the inspection of everyone's personal belongings immediately. With a sinister smile, Brian threatens anyone caught hiding contraband like alcohol or tobacco. Quickly, some recruits start handing over their forbidden items, afraid of punishment. Dimian calls them fools, and the leader yells for everyone to take out their belongings for inspection. When it is the boy's turn, Brian finds nothing special in his luggage. The leader then asks the boy's age, commenting he seems incredibly young. The protagonist replies he is 13 years old, leaving the man completely shocked. One of the veteran recruits complains that even brats are enlisting these days. He glares at the boy and accuses him of being there just to take advantage and have an easy life. The young man decides to ignore him, thinking it is not worth wasting his breath on that kind of person, but he memorizes the man's face and swears he will teach him that taking a beating from a child hurts. The veteran feels a sudden chill, and Brian calls him up for the inspection of his belongings. The man says that is all he has, but the platoon leader does not seem convinced. With a threatening look, Brian asks if he needs to search his bag personally. Frightened, the recruit pulls out several hidden items from his luggage, stuttering with fear. The leader warns him if he is caught hiding contraband again, the punishment will be severe. He threatens to make him run laps around the training field all night as punishment. Watching the scene, Demian thinks the man got what he deserved for his arrogance. After inspecting everyone, Brian concludes the search of personal belongings is complete. He then announces he needs to appoint an acting squad leader for his absence. The man pulls a list from his pocket and starts looking for a specific name. He smiles and comments there is a soldier who passed with excellent marks in the platoon. Brian then calls Demian by name and asks out loud who the recruit is. Upon seeing the boy, he remembers the veteran from earlier and thinks character is just as important as skill. The veteran who provoked him is surprised to see the boy was chosen as leader. Confused, he wonders who passed with excellent marks in the platoon. The camera focuses on him and he realizes the squad leader is young Demian. Brian asks if he is really 13 and the boy confirms his age. The veteran complains the army is not a playground and a brat cannot be a leader. The platoon leader tells him to shut his mouth, but the man insists his complaint is valid. He argues the acting leader must have proven leadership to represent the platoon. And with a brat in charge, everyone's discipline would go down the drain. Demian thinks he did not even want the position, but the man's persistence is annoying him. He decides to play into the provocation and says he would do a better job than a muscle-bound fool. Brian asks the name of the veteran, who introduces himself as Kyle, and the leader makes a decision. He places a hand on the man's shoulder and warns him about his disrespectful behavior. With a threatening look, Brian tells him never to insult a comrade again. The veteran agrees in fear and the leader lets him go, saying it will not be just a warning next time. But Brian admits the man has a point and a leader needs authority. Kyle then suggests he himself be the leader, but the instructor denies his request. The veteran then proposes a fight and the winner will become the squad leader. The platoon leader turns to Demian and asks if he agrees with the proposal. The boy accepts the challenge, thinking it is a good opportunity to establish discipline. He mocks him and says all he needs to do is crush that mountain of muscles. Brian asks if the other recruits agree, and they all answer yes in unison. The leader then takes them to the training grounds to settle the dispute. Kyle glares at his opponent with a smile of contempt and confidence in victory. The instructor announces the combat will begin immediately to determine the leader. He explains the fight ends if one of the opponents surrenders and asks if they are ready. The muscular man cracks his neck and says he is more than ready for the fight. Calmly and confidently, Demian also confirms he is ready for combat. With both prepared, Brian gives the signal and the fight for the leadership position begins. The veteran shows off and says he feels bad for beating up a child. Annoyed by the provocation, Kyle clenches his fists and calls the boy a brat. With eyes red with anger, the man swears he will make him pay for his big mouth. Demian watches his opponent and admits he is faster than he expected. He thinks compared to the soldiers from his past life, the veteran is actually decent, but only decent because he is no match for the experienced boy's skills. Kyle is shocked to see the boy dodge his punch as if he knew where it was going to hit. He accuses him of using cheap tricks and lunges with a strike he swears he will not miss. The protagonist simply says he is too slow and prepares for the counterattack. Furious, the man tries to grab him to throw him to the ground since he cannot land a punch. He leaps toward the boy with open hands to try and pin him down. In the blink of an eye, Demian dodges the attack and positions himself behind his adversary. The veteran is confused, not understanding where the boy went, and the young man reappears behind him. With a man-infused punch, the boy hits him squarely in the stomach with all his might. He knows a direct hit with mana is enough to knock anyone down. However, to his surprise, the man gets up, and he realizes he is tougher than he looked. With hatred in his eyes, Kyle swears he will take down that brat once and for all. He charges wildly, and Demian decides it is time to end that fight. The boy lands another powerful blow to the veteran's face, making him stagger. The man groans in pain and falls to his knees, unable to defend himself from the attack. He passes out and falls face first into the dirt, completely defeated by the boy. Demian watches him and realizes his opponent has already lost consciousness from the final blow. With an intimidating look, he turns to the others and asks if anyone else wants to try. All the recruits shake their heads in denial, terrified by the display of power. The instructor announces the end of the fight and declares Demian the new acting squad leader. Later, Kyle leaves the infirmary feeling humiliated for having been defeated. He cannot believe he passed out and was carried to the infirmary like that. The man remembers nothing after the first blow and wonders if he was knocked out at the start. He who thought he was the strongest of the group suffered a pathetic defeat to a boy. Kyle then enters the barracks and sees his platoon mates gathered. They get worried and wonder if they should stop him from causing more trouble. The veteran approaches Demi and calls his name, putting the boy on alert. Kyle drops to his knees, admitting defeat, and swears from now on he will serve the boy as his new commander. With this, the protagonist is surprised and wonders if he ended up hitting the big guy's head too hard. The big guy explains the young man is the strongest opponent he has ever faced despite being so young and deserves respect. He begs to be a loyal follower while the boy realizes his rival highly values a warrior's honor. But the redhead says he does not need formal titles and asks to just be called by his name Demian. Then the two shake hands, sealing an agreement of friendship and mutual cooperation within that military unit. A week passes quickly since enlistment and we see the soldiers training hard under the hot sun. While running, the hero notes the training is very tough to make time pass faster for the rookies. As soon as the activity is over, the instructor dismisses everyone but asks the redhead to follow him elsewhere. Curious, the boy wonders where they are going so suddenly and why he was the only one called by the superior. They arrive in front of the administrative office, and the young man wonders if some important announcement will be made now. Upon entering the room, the protagonist notices the other squad leaders were also summoned for the meeting. At that moment, one of the recruits looks at the boy with contempt and wonders what a pipsqueak is doing there. The arrogant guy says out loud the little one looks like a bug because he is so skinny and keeps making mean jokes. With that, he imagines how funny it would be to see the hero next to Kyle, since the two are total opposites in size. Annoyed, the redhead glares at the guy who asks what he is looking at, mocking the shape of his eyes. The bully gets furious at the boy's boldness while the others around start laughing at the tense situation, but a high-ranking officer enters the room and orders immediate silence, asking who is making so much noise. The jealous guy whispers he will settle the score later, and the hero notes all the leaders are present there. The officer explains the reason for the summons is to warn them about a competition between platoons in a week. He orders everyone to prepare their units well for this important evaluation, and the soldiers respond in unison. After the notice, the superior dismisses the group, and everyone starts leaving the room to return to their barracks. Suddenly, the protagonist is stopped by the same guy from before who seems unwilling to let things go. The bully warns the redhead is just a kid and threatens to beat him badly if he continues with that behavior. But another leader steps in to defend the hero, saying the aggressive one is the one who does not know how things work there. The angry guy tells the rookie to get out of the way if he does not want to get hit too, but the young man is unfazed by the threat. Then, the new ally tells the boy they should leave and let that fool talk to himself in the middle of the hallway. However, the protagonist stops halfway with a serious look as if he just had an interesting idea. He asks which platoon the guy belongs to, and the arrogant one proudly replies he is the leader of the fourth group. With a smile on his face, the hero says he will remember that and promises to meet his rival in the team competition. Walking down the hallway, the new ally asks if the boy is really the Demian everyone talks about. Curious, the hero wants to know how he knows his name, and the young man explains he heard a lot about his talent from Apple. Gerard introduces himself as the leader of the third platoon and says he is anxious to see the redhead's strength in the tournament. Upon returning to his group, the protagonist asks for all the soldiers' attention to give an important announcement. Kyle approaches, wanting to understand what is happening, while the other recruits fall completely silent. At that moment, the hero explains that in 1 week the grand competition between all the platoons on the base will take place. With great determination, the boy states they are going to take first place no matter what in that tournament, but he warns there is a vital detail about the 3 enemy units they need to memorize right now. The redhead declares the main plan to totally crush the 4th platoon, showing no mercy whatsoever. With a sinister look, the protagonist guarantees he will specifically focus on taking down the leader of that squad. In the second week of training, the atmosphere on the battlefield changes completely, becoming much more tense and serious. The instructor explains the military focus is victory, and therefore everyone will learn crucial formations for the dispute. He mentions that even though it is a team exercise, soldiers with unique skills will earn extra points. Hearing this, the hero thinks this is a great chance to get a good grade to choose his future unit. With a confident smile, the little warrior hopes everyone gives their all so they are not left behind. The officer begins to teach the wedge formation, which serves as a powerful attack to break enemy lines. This tactic works like a giant arrow with huge destructive power, but it is dangerous if the front is defeated. Thinking about the strategy, the boy notes Kyle is the perfect person to lead the tip of this heavy formation. So the instructor orders everyone to split into 2 groups to start practicing the movement immediately. The protagonist asks the big guy to take command of one side, and the veteran accepts the challenge with great enthusiasm. Calling his allies, the redhead decides to pass on some valuable tips on how to improve that attack tactic. One of the rookies asks if he has ever done this before, and the hero replies he learned everything from his military father. Gathered in a circle, the group listens closely to the secret plan to surpass what the instructor had taught. Excited about the strategy, the soldiers get pumped and promise to follow their young commander's orders to the letter. The boy orders the strongest to stay right behind him, while the smaller ones should protect the flanks with shields. He demands everyone raise their defenses up high to cover their heads, and the recruits confirm they understand. Observing the opposing team, the protagonist notices they are focusing entirely on total defense to win. Without hesitation, the hero yells for no one to slow down, because he intends to end the fight with just one strike. The instructor gives the starting signal, and the combat begins with both sides charging with a lot of grit and strength. Yelling in sync, the squad moves to the left, trying to keep the formation steady during the charge. Seeing the progress, he notes the group is in sync for the first time and advancing without hesitation on the field. With that, the redhead yells for them to pick up the pace now that they are almost reaching the opposing team's defense. The squad follows the order and speeds up while keeping total focus on the charge alongside Kyle. At that moment, the hero decides to use his mana, and since he did not use it in physical training, he should use it now. He takes a deep breath and orders everyone to push hard to shove the enemy line with everything they have. The impact happens violently and the two formations collide in the center of the training field. But the protagonist yells for them to push harder and aim for the weak spots in the defense as planned. By focusing on the empty spaces instead of the people he knows the enemy will fall into total panic, he spots the exact moment his opponent's guard slips and prepares the final blow to win the match. Then the little warrior gives the signal and his allies push aggressively to knock down their rivals. With quick movements, the recruits strike the adversary's legs to throw the opposing group off balance. The soldiers on the opposing team start to fall and wonder what is going on in that chaos. Kyle gets annoyed seeing his men on the ground and yells for everyone to get up quickly to fight. The big guy grits his teeth in frustration and tries to regain control of the situation before everything gets worse. However, the hero appears right in front of him and asks if the big guy forgot he is his real opponent. Furious, the giant to the redhead to get out of his way, but the boy stands firm, blocking his path. The boy mocks him, asking if he really wants him to move, and executes an agile dodging maneuver. Kyle is confused by his adversary's speed and ends up losing his balance because of his own weight. With a precise push, the protagonist knocks down the veteran, who falls on his back in the dirt, not understanding anything. Looking down from above, the boy admits his rival has a good body, but warns he needs to use his strength with intelligence. Watching everything from afar, the instructor is very impressed by the tactical performance shown by the boy. He thinks the young man's physique is nothing special, but it is hard to believe he is the same age as the others. The officer orders the combat to end and declares the victory of today's practice goes to Damien's team. Kyle gets up and greets the hero, saying it was good work and promises to win next time. Then the big guy asks what the secret of that strategy was, and if focusing on the holes in the defense was intentional. The group starts discussing using this same tactic during the grand competition between the base platoons. By evening, the redhead watches his comrades who used to run away from training now practicing on their own. He is satisfied with the squad's positive atmosphere, thinks about the arrogant leader of the 4th platoon. Suddenly, the protagonist senses a strange presence nearby and turns to see who is watching them there. The jealous guy from before appears, mocking the training, and wonders if those soldiers have gone crazy. Kyle gets outraged, asking what those fools said, and if they really called their leader a brat. The rival scoffs, saying they are just telling the truth, and asks if the pathetic group has a problem with that. With a sarcastic smile, the guy tells his allies to let it go, because the boy does not know his place as a leader. Watching from afar, the protagonist wonders if that guy is really begging to take a good beating. However, the hero decides to ignore the provocation and orders his 1st platoon to return to the barracks right now. At that, the little warrior makes a surprised expression, noticing his own soldiers' unexpected reaction. Furious, the redhead's comrades swear the rivals are done for when they meet in the squad competition. Pointing a finger, the big guy warns the slanted-eyed leader better prepare to be totally destroyed soon. Right after, the veteran asks if those were the members of the 4th platoon the boy had mentioned earlier. Overcome with anger, the protagonist group awakens a scary aura and swears to crush every single enemy. They decide to give up their rest to train harder and take down those arrogant jerks in the big tournament. Damien watches the scene, not believing they fell so easily for the provocation, but realizes it changed the mood. With a little smirk, he thinks this boost in motivation could be something very positive for their performance. Meanwhile, in the administrative office, instructor Raymond meets with the commander to report their progress. Varys asks if there are any promising new recruits, and the officer confirms a few are standing out quite a bit. The instructor explains 2 young men in particular caught his eye because of their extraordinary skills. He points out both are very young but show a mana control nobody expected for that age. Surprised by the information, the superior wants to know if the rookies have some secret or a noble family background. But Raymond says most are commoners, and learning to cultivate mana costs a fortune they do not possess. Reviewing the documents, he notices the heroes and Apple's lives seem too ordinary, which sounds very suspicious. Then the officer mentions there was a clash between the units earlier today involving exactly the young redhead. Varys hears the other leaders looked at the boy with contempt for being small, but the group's reaction was different. The insult ended up uniting the 1st platoon, who now accept the protagonist as their true war commander. Finding the situation interesting, the man reflects on the potential of that unit, which grew stronger through rivalry. With a snap of his fingers, the superior suggests a plan to test the limits of these new soldiers in an intense way. The two whisper about how they will change the rules to see how far the groups can hold up under such pressure. Raymond fears the idea might go wrong, but the commander states if they fail it is because they are worthless. The order is given to increase the training intensity of the 1st and 4th platoons to the maximum level allowed. Feeling a sudden chill, the muscular veteran and his friends realize something very bad is about to happen. Back at the barracks, the recruits complain about receiving extra training as a penalty and do not understand the real reason. The recruits complain they added crawling exercises and one fears he might have spoken too much at a bad time. With that, the muscular veteran asks the protagonist if this crawling story is really true. The hero admits he knows what the bosses are planning but says there is nothing they can do about it now. Then the redhead walks into the barracks glaring at everyone and asks if they came there just to play around at the camp. He explains the exercise will be hard on the body, but it will give them more endurance than the other platoons will have. Hearing this, the soldiers think if they complain now they will look more spoiled than a 13-year-old child. At that moment, the young leader smiles and says he will help the group, so everyone gives their best in training. But some recruits worry about the rocks on the ground and the boy asks if they expected soft blankets. Kyle notes the little one speaks with great authority on the subject, and the boy confirms he has crawled a lot in his life. He remembers the dark moments where he had to stay glued to the ground just to survive real danger. With a serious look, the hero thinks the true goal of this crawling drill is not just physical exertion. He knows the activity is exhausting and meant to leave all the soldiers covered in cuts and bruises on their bodies. In that state of pain, nerves run high and cracks begin to form in the unity of any tight-knit platoon. The real plan is to test their stress and see which group will stay united between the rival 1st and 4th squads. But the protagonist will not fall for this obvious trap and orders everyone to grab the socks they received from stock. Confused, the soldiers ask why they suddenly need socks as they get ready for the new day of training. The hero shows the items and guarantees these simple pieces will be everyone's salvation during the heavy floor exercise. Out on the training field, the 1st platoon reports and the instructor asks if everyone is in their positions. Nilsson introduces himself as the one in charge of the class and warns today everyone will learn the low crawl technique. The assistant shows the correct posture, keeping the spear straight and moving fast with the help of firm hands and knees. Pointing to the obstacle course, the officer asks if the new soldiers are ready to face the challenge. Everyone responds with a positive shout, and the superior notices they have much more fire in their eyes than the other group. With a loud command, the instructor orders the 1st team to move out and start crossing through the barbed wire now. The soldiers advance with determination as they crawl swiftly under the metal protection net on the field. Watching the scene, the man finds it strange they are teaching the 2nd week, when it normally happens in the 4th week. He imagines crawling on that hard ground would be painful and everyone there would be suffering a lot to move forward. However, the officer widens his eyes in total shock, noticing something extraordinary happening right in front of him now. The recruits are flying through the obstacle course at an absurd speed, leaving the superior speechless with doubt. Nilsson wonders what is happening since it should be the first time they are doing this kind of exertion. Then the protagonist asks when the 2nd group can start, leaving the instructor completely disoriented by the scene. The recruits yell as they charge through the training field and show an impressive readiness. With this instructor, Nilsson is in shock and thinks they look like insane warriors hungry for victory. At that moment, the redhead smiles because he knows the officer has never seen anything like it in his entire military career. Kyle comments it was hard pretending he was in pain while easily passing through the obstacles. He shows they used cut socks as makeshift knee and elbow pads to protect their joints. The soldiers laugh and ask if the protagonist is a genius for having such a simple and effective idea. As soon as the drill is over, the group is dismissed to return to the barracks with a feeling of mission accomplished. Walking back, the muscular veteran asks where the boy learned this highly useful trick for crawling drills. The boy answers he learned it from his late father, but he also left a very important warning to follow. He reveals the advice was never to get caught by the instructor using tricks, while the officer screams furiously. The big guy laughs hard at the saying and claps the hero on the back, who wonders why he hits so hard. Now only the shield and spear training remains, and the hero gets excited to learn the supreme technique of the kingdom. This combat art was looked down upon by nobles but became unbeatable in the hands of whoever fully mastered it. The problem is most gave up at the start, but for the raid head's old self this was the only way forward. After training as if his life depended on it, he evolved even more upon meeting his master from the past. The protagonist wonders if his mentor is still crazy and hopes to meet him again sometime in the future. Meanwhile, the members of the 4th platoon complain a lot about the pain of crawling over the sharp rocks on the field. Kyle and the hero watch the rivals and notice they just finished their exhausting physical activities. The arrogant leader yells for his men to shut up and asks why everyone is whining so much. Dimian and his friend note the heavy mood in the neighboring group, while the soldiers seem to be at their breaking point. With this, the subordinates begin to stand up to their superior, saying being a leader does not give the right to humiliate. The redhead's comrades notice the tension and give thanks for using the protections created by the young commander. At that, the 1st platoon bursts out laughing, and the rival gets furious seeing they are having so much fun. He suspects the adversaries used some dirty trick since they look perfectly fine after the effort. The jealous guy clenches his fist in hatred and swears to crush every single one of them when the competition finally begins. There are only a few days left until the tournament, and both leaders' exchange looks loaded with heavy rivalry and seriousness. Time flies by, and the day of the great dispute between all the military-based platoons finally arrives. All 4 units gather in the main courtyard as they wait to be called for the start of the matches. Kyle looks at the protagonist and calls him noticing something strange in the little warrior's behavior today. The big guy wonders if he is imagining things, but feels the redhead seems like a different person now. Kyle notices something different about his friend but cannot explain it, and the boy wonders if he grew a little recently. Then the recruits laugh, saying the redhead is already tall and the big guy is the one who is far too giant. At that moment, the protagonist wonders if his comrades sensed his shift in energy by pure instinct. The night before, the hero finally advanced his mana technique to the 2-star level and feels strong. With this, all his daily cultivation effort inside the training camp finally yielded a real result. Calling his loyal follower, the boy prepares to reveal his true goal in the grand dispute. With a focused look, the little one states he wants to win the squad competition overwhelmingly. He knows the top 5 soldiers earn the right to choose any rare equipment from the royal armory. Most choose low-level defense items, but the hero knows those prizes are not what he is after. His desire is a ring with special abilities he heard about in his past life as a great secret. It is a very high-level permanent accessory that can totally change the course of his future battles. To get the ring, he needs first place, since other mana users might grab it if they choose first, so the protagonist asks if the big guy can fulfill his part, and the giant confirms with great confidence. Clapping his hands to get everyone's attention, the veteran asks the platoon to listen to their leader's words. Kyle announces to everyone the plan is to completely dominate the tournament and claim the glory of the top spot. Excited, the soldiers yell in unison they are going to take the first position and show fiery determination. Satisfied with the group's motivation, the boy hears the announcement of the first match, calling his unit to the field. Walking steadily, the first platoon enters the arena ready to show the results of all their hard training. The officer explains the match will have 2 rounds where teams will swap offensive and total defense positions. If the offensive team cannot capture the flag within the time limit, they will be declared the losers of the round. Dimian watches the second opposing platoon and orders everyone to brace for the first impact of the battle. With authority, the hero tells the squad to act exactly as they practiced during their secret night training, but the redhead reinforces for the giant to push the front line with absolute brute force as soon as he gets the signal. The starting command is given and the 2 formations begin to move, creating enormous tension among the soldiers. The attackers run, yelling orders to crush the defense, while the ground shakes with the recruits' advance. At that moment, shields clash hard and defenders try to hold the line steady without letting anyone pass. The opposing team is confused, realizing there are no openings in that formation, which looks like a solid wall. Watching from afar, the instructor finds the tightly closed tactic strange and thinks they can only defend. Suddenly, the protagonist yells for his group to push with everything, leaving the officer surprised by the change. Kyle lets out a powerful war cry and uses his entire weight to destroy the enemy's guard in an instant. The soldiers shout in panic as they are pushed back, and the leader orders everyone to hold firm against the impact. At that, the commander of the second platoon gets furious and tells his team to focus solely on defense so they do not fall. At that moment, the protagonist calls for the giant, signals that the time has come to put the plan into action. Then Kyle unleashes a fierce roar and charges with everything, running over the adversaries trying to block his path. The rivals are in shock, seeing that monster destroying the front line using only his shoulders. With a commanding shout, the big guy tells his allies to stay close and keep the formation tightly packed. With this, the first group keeps pushing with a brutal force, making the enemies retreat endlessly. The enemy leader wonders how their coordination is so perfect even though they train for the same amount of time. But the redhead spots an opening in the defense and orders the entire squad to advance for the final attack right now. The clash between the teams is devastating and kicks up a cloud of dust as shields bash violently. Watching the scene, the instructors are left jaw dropped and ask if the group received some secret training. Raymond notes their performance is comparable to elite soldiers who have gone through advanced training. He quickly realizes the only reason for this absurd evolution is the little warrior's strategic leadership. Shouting orders, the protagonist tells the soldiers to spread out to completely shatter the opponent's guard. At that moment, we remember that every day after official practice, the recruits received extra tips from the boy. The fighters raise their shields above their shoulders and faithfully follow every teaching passed on by the hero. The officer smiles, seeing the boy silence his initial doubts, displaying a natural talent for command. Seeing the unprotected flag, the redhead announces this is the golden chance to end the match once and for all. Kyle searches for the target with a predator's gaze as he prepares to execute the decisive move of the evening. With a victorious smile, the giant finds the necessary gap and leaves the opposing captain in total panic. Desperate, the guy orders his men to stop the monster no matter what, even forgetting to attack. But the veteran gives them no chance and tells his comrades to group up to block the rival reinforcements. The enemies tremble in fear, seeing the big guy standing like a human wall, preventing any passage. Mockingly, the brute states everyone fell right into the trap set by his young master. The leader of the second platoon realizes the mistake too late and panics as he sees the plan come together. Quick movements cut through the air as the first squad's strategy flows flawlessly in the arena. Demian praises his partner's good work and advances, stepping over the opponent's fallen on the muddy ground. Jumping with agility, the protagonist flies toward the final goal while everyone watches in silence. With a precise strike, the little warrior captures the flag and finishes the round with enviable skill. The officer announces time is up and declares the second platoon failed miserably to defend their base. Raising the red flag, the hero celebrates his team's victory as everyone around cheers joyfully on the field. With that, the officer praises the first platoon's performance and predicts they will win the competition by a landslide. But another instructor disagrees and says he is not so sure about who the true champion of the day will be. At that moment, he points to the other side of the arena where a very intense battle is taking place right now. The superior asks if that group would not be a great opponent to face the protagonist's unit at the end. At that, we see the leader of the 4th platoon swearing heavily as he stomps the ground in anger over the result. He thought he would use the 3rd platoon just as a warm-up before crushing the red-haired boy's squad. However, the bully realizes the enemy is not moving and fears losing the match after already failing total defense. So he starts shouting desperate orders for his men to do exactly what he commanded earlier. Annoyed, a soldier questions why he does not fight too, instead of just barking orders from the back of the group. On the other side, Gerard asks Little Apple if they should advance and break the enemy line right then. The blonde boy answers no and explains they just need to hold their position so the rivals collapse on their own over time. With that, the leader accepts the plan and is impressed how a 14-year-old reads the field so well. At that moment, he watches the boy walk calmly and realizes his little ally is no ordinary child there. Gerard then orders everyone to focus on neutralizing the opposing shield bearers to keep their formation firm and stable. The sound of armor clashing echoes throughout the arena as the pressure between the two teams steadily increases. The arrogant leader of the 4th platoon loses his patience and calls his opponents cowards for dragging out the fight. Watching the scene, the captain of the 3rd group notes the rivals' morale and energy are already completely drained. One of the front-line soldiers starts drooling from exhaustion and says he can no longer hold the heavy shield's weight. Then the commander realizes the time has come and yells for his platoon to charge forward for the decisive attack now. With a powerful war cry, the recruits surge like a wave toward the enemies who are barely standing. The enemy defense line begins to crumble and the captain panics seeing his shield bearers being knocked down there. At that moment, the leader calls for Apple and signals that the final blow must be struck to end the match soon. The blonde boy runs at high speed toward the center of the chaos, displaying extraordinary agility. With a precise jump, the boy uses the adversary's shields as a platform to leap high into the arena's air. He flies over all the soldiers as he prepares his weapon to perform a special master move. Spinning his spear flawlessly, the young prodigy focuses his mana and creates a whirlwind of energy around himself. A massive impact hits the middle of the battlefield, throwing all the soldiers of the 4th platoon far away. The bully is in total shock at the humiliating defeat and wonders how he will beat the hero's team like that. At that, the guy glares at the protagonist from afar with a look of pure hatred, while the redhead just watches silently. The redhead raises the red flag and announces the match is over with the total victory of the 1st platoon. With this, the hero watches young Apple being carried by his friends and notes he will be a very tough opponent to beat. Then the protagonist walks alone and realizes the true final battle will be against the powerful 3rd unit. At that moment, a purple aura appears around the boy as he says he hopes to meet his blonde rival in the grand final. Suddenly, the rest time ends and the instructor yells for all the squads to gather on the field right now. With that, the giant asks if the next fight is against the 4th platoon, and the leader confirms they are desperate. Then the muscular veteran gets excited to crush the guy who called the little one a brat some time ago. Observing the adversaries, the redhead notes they are exhausted and their teamwork is a total mess. But the hero has no intention of going easy and warns he will take them all down swiftly and decisively, showing no mercy. At that, the allied soldiers laugh loud and say the time has come to make the big mouths pay for everything they said. Then the young man focuses his gaze and orders no one to get distracted so they can end this match in the blink of an eye. Promptly, his comrades reply they understand and show gritted teeth ready for the violent charge. At that moment, the first group positions itself in a perfect defensive line holding very heavy wooden shields. On the other side, the blue enemies try to organize, but their formation looks very weak compared to the hero's unit. With the starting signal given, the two teams glare at each other with hatred as tension takes over the dry grass. Shouting attack orders, the protagonist's squad charges like a furious herd toward the center of the arena. Then we see the two masses of soldiers running into each other, creating an epic war scene under the hot sun. Seeing this, the redhead realizes the rivals' square tactic is mediocre and they can break it easily. With a sinister smile, the little one decides he will stomp them so hard no one will dare to get up again today. At that moment, the big guy Kyle lets out a roar and jumps in the enemy front line, causing massive destruction. At that, the opponents fly into the air, terrified by such brute force coming from a simple rookie soldier. Furious, the rival leader curses his men and orders them to use all their energy to block the monster's advance. Then he yells for the shield bearers to protect the blue flag at all costs while the spearmen get ready. In that instant, the hero leaps over the defense and reminds the enemy captain he promised not to forget his face. With that, the guy is paralyzed with fear seeing the red-haired boy flying toward him with a predator's look. Quickly, the protagonist lands a powerful blow to his adversary's chest, who lets out a deep groan of pain. Then the young man lands gracefully on the ground while his defeated opponent kneels in the dirt, trying to breathe. At that, the jealous guy's eyes turn red with anger, and he swears there is a limit to being underestimated like that. At that moment, he grips his training staff tightly and asks if the redhead thinks he is just a scarecrow. Then the antagonist advances for a one-on-one fight, stating he can beat the hero easily if they fight alone. Calmly, the redhead dodges the predictable attack and thinks his rival's movements are slow and completely technique-free. Then the little one disarms his enemy in the blink of an eye and asks if that was really all he had to offer. The captain of the 4th unit looks at his empty hand, in total shock, unable to understand how he suddenly lost his weapon. Walking mockingly, the hero holds the stolen staff while silence falls over everyone present at the scene. Suddenly, the protagonist lands a brutal strike to his rival's face, who screams in pain as he is thrown to the hard ground. With a cold look, the boy warns that dropping your weapon on the battlefield is the same as asking to be taken down quickly. He focuses his mana in his fist and says the advice will serve as an eternal life lesson for the arrogant jerk. At that moment, the hero finishes the opponent with an energy-charged strike that kicks up a cloud of dust in the arena. The leader of the 4th platoon passes out from the impact, while the boy comments the fight was too easy and boring. The instructor watches the wipeout and judges the enemy unit as no longer fit to continue the military tournament. With that, the protagonist walks up to the objective and grabs the blue flag's pole with great firmness and superiority. Raising the trophy, the little warrior announces the 1st platoon's overwhelming victory over the rivals fallen in the dirt. Kyle smiles with satisfaction, saying the combat was refreshing, and praises his young commander's flawless leadership. While they carry the wounded man on a stretcher, the other soldiers comment in fear about the red-haired boy's real abilities. The officers admit the boy is a prodigy and might even be more talented than the base instructors themselves. At that moment, one of them feels a heavy presence and asks if something interesting is happening this afternoon. Looking back, the officer freezes in fear and makes an expression of extreme surprise at who just arrived in the courtyard. Enter Leonhardt Belkon, a legendary instructor from the 3rd Division known for his strength and absolute strictness in the kingdom. Immediately, all superiors perform the military salute, shouting glory to the kingdom to welcome the illustrious visitor. The eye-patch-wearing man asks Brian if the promising rookie he mentioned is that boy right in the middle of the group. The officer confirms the information while we see the soldiers tossing the protagonist in the air in festive celebration. Leonhardt gives a slight smirk and thinks finally an interesting guy has joined the ranks of the Royal Army. Back at the barracks, a recruit runs in yelling that something insane is happening inside the training center. Curious, the hero wants to know the reason for all the fuss, and his ally explains a big shot arrived at the base today. He reveals the officer is a living legend from the 3rd Division, and all the instructors are standing at attention. At that moment, the redhead asks what this famous soldier's name is, and his comrade tries to recall his actual name. With wide eyes, the hero takes a guess and asks if the man's name is Reinhardt or something similar. The protagonist then whispers the name Leonhardt, feeling his past is returning to haunt him right now. The ally confirms that was exactly his name, and the hero freezes at the shocking revelation made by his colleague. With a dark look, the boy starts walking outside while his friend asks where he's going all alone. The boy runs down the hallway, leaving his friend confused, not understanding what suddenly happened at that moment. At that, the hero thinks he needs to confirm everything with his own eyes to know if it is truly his old mentor from the past. Then the little one stops running upon seeing Instructor Brian walking next to the legendary eye-patch warrior in the hall. The officer notices the young man's presence and asks if he is not the soldier who stood out in the previous combat practices. With a smile, Brian says he was just going to look for the redhead to introduce the illustrious visitor from the 3rd Division. At that moment, the protagonist gives a formal salute, shouting glory to the kingdom to show his total military respect. The veteran asks if the boy's name is Demian, and the boy confirms the information, keeping a firm posture before him. With this, the master reflects the division is connected to the camp, but did not expect to meet the young prodigy so soon. The hero looks at the man and remembers he was the person who had the most positive impact on his past life as a warrior. Leonhardt explains he came personally to check the rookie's talent after hearing many praises from the instructor about his techniques. Observing his energy flow, the officer notes the little one is practicing a very efficient and powerful mana method. Then the superior asks which unit the young man intends to choose after finishing his basic training at that base. Thoughtful, the protagonist hesitates for a moment before giving the answer that will leave everyone present in total shock. With a determined smile, the boy reveals he plans to join the Neocolits unit as soon as he leaves the training center. Brian and the legendary warrior are jaw-dropped and ask if the boy is serious about such a dangerous decision. Neocolits is known as the kingdom's most brutal unit, responsible for hunting lethal monsters in the Forbidden Forest. The master questions the reason for this choice, and the redhead replies he wants to go there solely to become much stronger. Leonhardt offers a recommendation letter for the Noble Knight's Order, but the subordinate warns the invitation is rare. But the hero declines the generous offer and explains he has already decided his path to find someone important there. Respecting the little one's wishes, the veteran ends the conversation and tells the soldier to head back to the barracks to rest soon. As soon as the man walks away, Brian yells indignantly, asking if the young man realizes the golden opportunity he wasted. The instructor tries to convince his superior to let him talk to the boy again, but the master questions the officer's judgment. With a piercing look, the legend states his colleague surely failed to notice the intense and focused gleam in the boy's eyes. The officer lets out a loud laugh and wonders where such an intriguing child with only 13 years of age came from. He orders them to leave the redhead alone because he knows their paths will cross again inside the famous 3rd Division. The next day, the 1st platoon prepares to face the 3rd unit in a match that promises to be quite difficult. The little commander assures his soldiers that no squad from any training center can defeat them now. Kyle laughs confidently, agreeing the group became very powerful under the leadership of his very talented young friend. With a focused look, the hero orders the team to crush the opponents following their usual victory routine in that arena. The officer announces the first attack will be from the 3rd platoon and gives the signal to start the final big match of the day. The little redhead yells for everyone to hold formation as he braces for the clash against the 3rd platoon in the arena. Observing the enemy, he notices the adversaries are in a very solid shield line that is hard to break now. Gerard tells young Apollo his role will be critical to secure their group's final victory today. With that, the soldiers charge in sync, making the ground shake as they approach the protagonist's team. The impact between the wooden defenses is deafening and both sides try to resist each other's pressure. At that moment, the hero orders his men to push with everything because he notices the fighting pattern is the same as before. The opposing leader notices the resistance and yells for the blonde boy to act immediately to change the course of the match. Then the little prodigy positions himself alone behind the front line, waiting for the right command to attack. The protagonist is confused, seeing the rivals opening their own guard, and wonders what their secret plan is. At that, the blonde boy glares at the opponent seriously as he readies his weapon for a devastating strike in the arena. With a swift move, he hits the shield bearers and sends several soldiers flying, showing immense strength on the field. Demian watches the scene in total shock, unable to believe such a young boy possesses so much destructive power. Celebrating the success, Gerard tells his men to push through the hole open in the 1st platoon's defense right now. But the big guy Kyle refuses to back down and yells angrily, saying he will not let anyone get past him. He uses his entire musculature to halt the enemy advance, and the adversaries are impressed by his endurance. Relieved, the redhead notes they managed to stop the charge in time, but knows the situation is still very tense there. The hero reflects on how impressive his blonde rival is for being able to knock down shield bearers with just one blow. On the other side, the light-eyed boy wonders what kind of monster this giant is who blocked his attack. He realizes things have gotten complicated and notices the brute is staring right at him during the fight. In an earlier moment, the protagonist told his friend to keep his eyes glued to that apple guy the whole time. The veteran asked who this opponent was, and the young man replied he would know as soon as he saw him on the field. With a confident smile, the ally guarantees he will accomplish the mission because brute strength is his greatest specialty. Returning to the present, the leader of the 3rd group asks if the prodigy can break the defense, and he says he needs to. The blonde understands he will not win with physical strength alone and decides he must change his combat approach now. So he starts focusing intense blue energy around his spear to use a secret technique. With a quick dash, the boy delivers a powerful blow against the veteran's shield, who tries to brace himself firmly. Kyle manages to block the attack at the last second, and the instructors are amazed by his defensive skill. But the little rival flashes a wicked smile and warns he will keep hitting until the defense completely breaks. Feeling the weight of the impact, the big guy grits his teeth and wonders how a child can have so much strength. The final strike hits the shield violently, and the hero watches his ally struggle not to be crushed by the opponent. The blonde boy charges with everything and yells that this will be the end of the line for the enemy squad on the field. With it, the big guy lets out a groan of pain as he tries to protect his body from his rival's brutal spear attack. But the hero quickly appears and jumps between the two to block the blow with his own wooden shield. The impact generates an energy explosion, and the protagonist successfully stops the little prodigy's weapon. The two young men glare at each other with great intensity as they feel each other's power in that combat arena. At that moment, the instructor's whistle echoes through the training field, signaling a necessary pause in the battle. The redhead and his partner are confused by the sudden interruption as they catch their breath from the intense fight. The officer announces time is up and the 3rd platoon lost for failing to capture the rival flag in time. Appel is frustrated and cannot believe the muscular veteran withstood all his consecutive attacks there. Worried, the hero asks if his friend is okay, and the giant replies he can still keep fighting today. Then the protagonist orders him to rest in the second half, but the ally stubbornly says he did not break anything. The boy explains there are still 2 weeks of training left, and making an injury worse now would be a very grave mistake. But he asks the big guy to just guard the flag, and the veteran notes the redhead wants to spare his pride. With it, the giant accepts the mission, and the boy tells the rest of the group to prepare to crush the rivals. It is time to switch sides, and the instructor orders the 1st platoon to get ready for the all-out attack. The young commander warns everyone is exhausted but reminds them this is the final match of the grand competition. With a fixed stare, he decides he will resolve everything in just 5 minutes to guarantee the team's ultimate victory. The protagonist takes a deep breath and focuses his mana as he prepares to lead the charge against the enemy squad. On the other side, the blonde boy and his soldiers take their defensive stance, waiting for the redhead's violent advance. The hero's plan is to capture the adversary flag and seal his group's triumph in record time in the arena. The two units face off in the middle of the arena as the tension reaches its maximum level in that place. At that moment, the protagonist thinks the decisive moment of the final between the base platoons has finally arrived. He reflects on everything he has shown as acting leader and knows he must now deliver his final masterstroke. It is time to leave the instructors impressed with his true strength and his military command capability. With a smile on his face, the little warrior prepares to act and prove his real worth on the battlefield. Defeating the third platoon where the talented rival is will guarantee him the title of best recruit of that class. The hero notices the blonde opponent will personally protect the target because he lacks energy for the front line. So the boy understands there will be no avoiding a direct clash against the prodigy if he wants to win the round quickly. The officer gives the starting signal and the final phase of the military tournament begins with a deafening war cry. The redhead orders full speed from the start and tells all his men to follow his quick steps on the grass. At that, the squad charges at an absurd speed and the rivals do not understand how they keep the formation so tight on the field. With this, the enemy leader orders everyone to raise their shields and warns them to watch out for the young red-haired commander. But the hero moves with agility beneath their attacks, realizing their defense is useless against his speed. At that moment, the protagonist wraps his spear in powerful purple mana and swears he will pierce the adversary barrier. He leaps with everything, delivering a devastating blow, while mystical energy shines intensely during the fatal impact. At that, the wooden shield is pierced as if it were paper, and the soldiers are terrified by such brute force. The little warrior keeps knocking down opponents one by one, clearing the way for his allies to advance immediately. Then the redhead yells for his platoon to break the enemy lines now that their main formation is destroyed. The defenders fall into total panic, trying to stop the unstoppable advance but cannot hold back the first group's fury. Even surrounded by several spears, the hero remains calm and focuses on his final goal of capturing the blue flag today. With a spinning move, he escapes a deadly trap, proving his reflexes are on a superior level. So the rivals' weapons only hit the empty ground, and they are shocked to see how the boy vanished from right in front of them. Quickly, the protagonist strikes the soldiers' ankles, making them all fall in pain in the middle of that chaos. At that moment, he orders the first platoon to regroup for the final charge against the third team's base. Kyle is already out front, causing chaos, and laughs, noticing the enemies did not expect such a fast arrival. With this, Gerard cannot believe the adversary's speed, but knows the little blonde is his last hope. With a serious look, the prodigy understands he needs to stop the redhead no matter what, so they do not lose the valuable flag. So he announces he will stop the hero alone and asks his captain to protect the target with the remaining troops there. The leader of the third squad feels frustrated having to rely on a child in such a critical combat situation. Finally, the two rival prodigies face off in the center of the battlefield for the decisive confrontation of that competition. Enter the legend of future General Apple Van Striel, who awakens an overwhelming aura of blue mana around his body. Both leap at each other simultaneously, creating a shockwave that kicks up dust all over the training arena. The protagonist thinks this is the perfect chance to test his new abilities against someone truly talented. At that, he executes an opening move that looks like an attack, but soon the blonde realizes it is just a quick feint. With it, the hero smiles, realizing his opponent is smart, and prepares for his true finishing blow. The blonde boy attacks with incredible speed, and his spear shines with a cutting energy that scares the spectators. The clash between their weapons generates mana sparks, and the two youths show they are fighting with everything they have now. Appel steps back for an instant to analyze his adversary's strength and realizes the redhead is much more dangerous than he looks. At that moment, the hero increases the flow of his purple energy and asks his rival to give his all in that mortal duel. He guarantees he will use every drop of his power to claim victory and defeat the future general in front of everyone. The little prodigy charges with his glowing spear and yells that this will be the end of the line for his red-haired opponent. But he is left in total shock, realizing the hero's mana is strong enough to break his wooden weapon. At that moment, the blonde wonders if his opponent is not a commoner, and if he possesses a special background like his own now. He is bewildered, trying to understand how that boy can control mystical energy with such perfection and skill. For the prodigy, facing such a barrier in a basic training camp is something completely outside military reality. Calmly, the protagonist walks toward his rival and says the time has come to end the dispute once and for all. Then the redhead prepares a devastating attack, warning the opponent he will have no chance to block the final strike. The impact is violent, and the blonde boy fights with all his strength not to be thrown out of the combat arena. Fallen on the ground, the little one regrets his defeat as he realizes his team's flag is about to be captured soon. The blue pennant waves in the wind, signaling that the competition's main objective was finally achieved by the hero today. With a victory shout, the protagonist raises the trophy and celebrates the first platoon's triumph in front of everyone present. Apple stays on the ground with a look of frustration for having lost to someone who seems even more talented than him there. At that, the young commander calmly walks over to his fallen rival, showing the respect one warrior should have for another. He extends his hand to help his colleague up while the blonde congratulates the winner but promises a rematch in the future. With a smile, the redhead suggests they fight on the same side next time, because beating the prodigy twice will be a tough task. The boy tells him to stop exaggerating, and the hero thinks this defeat might turn his ally into an even greater monster. While the squad celebrates joyfully, the protagonist decides to just savor that moment of triumph with his comrades. The instructors watch the party and promise they will keep up the heavy pace for the last 14 days of intense training at the base. Leonhardt looks at the scene with a smirk and decides for now the recruits deserve to enjoy the glory of victory. With that, the soldiers throw themselves on the ground exhausted but happy as the sun sets on the horizon of the military training center. Kyle looks at the dinner table and is left speechless, asking if all that wonderful food is really real and tangible. We see a feast fit for kings with juicy chickens and steaks, showing that winning the competition was totally worth it for everyone. The hero watches his men devouring the meat and thinks it is natural they are so excited after so much physical effort. But he misses his old master and regrets not talking a bit more with the eye patch wearing veteran today. Suddenly, Officer Brian asks permission to sit at the table, and the recruits welcome him with great enthusiasm and sincere respect. The instructor asks if the protagonist still stands by his decision to decline the generous offer made by legendary Leonhardt yesterday. With a serene look, the redhead confirms he does, and the officer laments, saying that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a commoner. Then the superior changes the subject and asks if the boy has heard the recent news about the other prodigy in the training group. He reveals the master also invited 8-Ball to the Knight's Order and wants to know what the blonde boy's choice was. With maturity, the hero replies he respects any decision his friend makes because a life belongs only to the talented youth himself. The instructor bursts out laughing and says the boy is really quite annoying for not accepting the rare proposal. While savoring his meat, the redhead shows that nothing will make him change his mind about his future military destination. Raising his glass of wine, the officer congratulates everyone for the hard work they have done over the past 2 weeks. With that, the superior wishes luck on each of their paths and warns that heavy training returns right tomorrow. The soldiers toast, shouting glory to the kingdom as the celebratory mood takes over the entire dining hall. Time flies, and finally the third and final week of intense training begins for the young recruits. We see the men practicing thrusts with their spears, while the officer orders them to make the movements faster. The protagonist notices his comrade's attitude has completely changed, and it was not just in his platoon. The whole training center seems more focused, and the hero believes the competition served as a great incentive. At that moment, the superior authorizes a short 5-minute break so everyone can catch their breath. Kyle approaches his friend still panting and asks if he has heard the recent gossip going around the base. He says the mood in the 4th platoon turned to trash after the defeat, and many are being sent away. The big guy laughs at the rival leader who fled as soon as the competition ended, calling the guy a pathetic loser. But the redhead touches his ally's shoulder and says mocking others is not what really matters to them right now. He explains that even with the group's high score, each person still needs individual points to choose their unit. The boy knows most dream of an administrative soldier position at the palace because it is a very relaxed job. However, the spots are minimal and only a small fraction of the applicants actually manages to get into that noble sector. The giant agrees the competition will be fierce since everyone there applied for the military seeking that exact same goal. Suddenly, the muscular veteran grabs the boy and asks in a panic if he is also planning to go to the palace. Calmly, the hero reveals he does not intend to go there, and his friend is surprised because his grades are excellent. The hero asks if his partner really wants to be locked up all day inside an office doing paperwork. Kyle admits the place sounds suffocating but thinks since it is the best unit they should try to get in first. The protagonist scoffs, saying the big guy would not last a month standing still in a closed place without using his body. Curious, the muscular guy wants to know where the young man is going then, and the redhead prepares to give his final answer. With a firm look, the little one declares he will join the dreaded Neocolits unit, leaving everyone around in shock. The veteran panics, asking if he is talking about that deadly place, and yells that the hero has lost his mind. At that, the boy kicks his friend to make him shut up, while the big guy complains about the unexpected strike. Catching his breath, the ally says he already figured something like that from someone as exceptional as the protagonist. The big guy laughs out loud, saying the boy is completely crazy, but admits that is exactly why he likes him. The break ends, and the two return to training while Kyle celebrates he will have one less competitor for the palace spot. The instructor congratulates everyone for their effort and says they all worked very hard during the last month of intense training. At that, the protagonist can barely believe graduation day has arrived and feels time flew by at the barracks. The officer states he will be rooting for everyone's future and asks them to continue contributing to the kingdom's total glory. At that moment, the superior calls the hero's name while the other recruits watch the scene in complete silence in the arena. Then the soldiers perform the official military salute and yell in unison, wishing eternal glory to their country now. Instructor Raymond concludes the ceremony and announces he will call the 5 students who stood out the most in basic training. With this, a mood of anticipation fills the place as everyone waits to find out who the class's top graduate was. The The redhead is announced as the first on the list, and his comrades are extremely happy for his well-deserved achievement. Next, young Appel is also called to the front, confirming his exceptional talent during the past fights. Kyle and the other leaders are also rewarded, and the muscular giant shows a satisfied smile for being at the top. The officer orders the 5 chosen to follow him to the royal armory to receive a special weapon as a prize of honor. Arriving at the location, the superior announces they can choose any item and calls the protagonist to go in alone first. With a smile, the boy walks in and thinks the moment he had been waiting for has finally truly arrived. Looking around, he notices everything is very well organized and filled with high-quality royal military equipment. The boy looks at the potion shelves and wonders if there is any hidden treasure he does not fully know about yet. But soon the redhead decides to focus on his original plan and walks purposefully to grab only what he really needs now. He steps forward, firmly remembering he has not been able to take his eyes off that object since entering the dark room. Searching the corners, the little warrior finally finds the item he was looking for with such dedication and deep desire. It is a magic ring that grants temporary invisibility when the user infuses their mana into the small accessory. The hero knows the other rookies will not even notice the ring, because none of them have the ability to sense pure energy. As soon as the redhead leaves, the instructor allows the blonde to enter, who walks seriously toward the interior of the royal armory. Curious, the protagonist wonders if his rival grabbed that same item in his past life, since he also uses mana. The boy stands outside and confesses he is anxious to see what the other young prodigy's choice will be there. To everyone's surprise, the blonde boy walks out much faster than expected, holding a small object. Seeing the item in his colleague's hands, the redhead widens his eyes in absolute shock and wonders if he really saw it right. Kyle notices his weird reaction and wants to know what happened, but the hero changes the subject, saying nothing is wrong. Analyzing from afar, the protagonist is sure there is no mistake about the seal the opponent brought from the treasure room today. The item bears the emblem of a kingdom that fell long ago, and the young man wonders how his rival learned to use mana. With a dark thought, the boy reflects if his ally has some secret connection to that extinct nation in the past. Finally, the officer closes the doors and asks if everyone already has their new equipment in hand, so they can leave soon. The instructor asks if the blonde knows what that seal is, and the boy says he just felt a divine power coming from the object. With it, the officer explains the item has the power to ward off bad luck and protect whoever carries it in future battles. At that moment, we see the other recruits pick decent weapons like a sharp spear and a shield made by a famous artisan. Then the superior turns to the protagonist and asks if he's sure he is satisfied with his simple choice. The man warns that it is just a ring that slightly reduces body weight, and the redhead feigns surprise at the information given. Curious, the officer asks if he took it without knowing and tells the little one to put the accessory on his finger to test the effect right away. As soon as he puts it on, the hero feels his weight decrease a lot and knows that with this he will move much faster on the real field. The superior asks what he thinks, and the protagonist answers the item is actually much better than he imagined before. With a smile, the redhead realizes the artifact grants invisibility and lightness, definitely being a high-grade item. After that, the group starts heading back to the main building, because the time has come to choose their future royal units. Once inside the room, the instructor hands out the documents and tells the little warrior to fill out the registration forms soon. Without hesitation, the boy writes the name of the Neocolits unit on the paper, confirming his desire to go to the most dangerous place. The officer thinks it is a shame the young man is not going to the Knight's Order, where he would certainly have a bright and wealthy future. The protagonist hands in the signed document, and the superior accepts the request with a look full of deep concern for the boy. The man warns that the chosen location is highly lethal, and tells the hero to be careful, while the little one thanks him for the advice. With that, the officer praises his effort over the month and says he can leave in a few days as soon as the official notice arrives at the base. The door closes and a farewell mood takes over the hallway as the training period comes to its definitive end. The redhead feels a tightness in his chest because he is finally going there, but is interrupted by a shout calling his name now. The little blonde approaches and says he heard the news through the instructor about his old rival's unusual choice. Baffled, the blonde asks why he is not going to the Knights since he has talent, and the hero says that is not his place. At that moment, the prodigy reveals he is going to the Elite Order because he received a direct recommendation from the legendary Master Belkin. The protagonist puts his hand on his friend's shoulder, saying it was a wise choice and guarantees he will do very well there. With a smile, the blonde comments the hero is unpredictable for praising something he himself just declined without thinking much. The boy warns the Neocolits unit is a terrible place and asks the redhead to be careful during dangerous missions in the woods. The two youths shake hands firmly, and the blonde prodigy asks that they meet again sometime in the future. The protagonist thanks his friend for his care and displays a serene look as he prepares to follow his own solo path. Watching his ally leave, the hero wonders if the blonde knows that in the future he will become the great general of the Baroque kingdom. The redhead thinks maybe the boy will turn into an even more powerful monster and confesses he is anxious to see this royal evolution. Then the little warrior decides it is time to say goodbye to his other platoon comrades before leaving that base. The boy enters the quiet barracks and looks around, feeling that important cycle of his new life has just closed. The big guy comes running up and calls the hero's name as he walked calmly down the hallway now. Kyle says he thought his friend was going to leave without saying goodbye, and the redhead smiles, saying he would never do such a thing. With a mysterious look, the veteran warns they will meet much sooner than the boy imagines there. At that, the muscular guy asks for all the soldiers' attention so the squad leader can give his final words today. The protagonist thanks everyone for following his command and asks them to try hard in their new military units. Then the recruits shout in celebration, wishing all the best for their young master and promising to see each other soon. With his backpack ready, the boy walks out of the training center, feeling the weight of his new heroic journey. Suddenly, someone formally calls him Mr. Demian, making the boy stop in the middle of the sunny courtyard. A beautiful woman introduces herself as Deal from the Yahello Merchant Guild, saying it is a great pleasure to see him again there. She shows some documents detailing how the Raidhead's investment funds were utilized in her businesses. With that, the lady projects a profitable return of 3% of net revenue based on the young man's terms. Impressed, the hero realizes the merchant organized everything flawlessly and very professionally on paper. At that moment, she offers to answer any questions, and the boy replies everything is perfect there. The protagonist decides to proceed with the plan and warns the insurance money will soon arrive in his real name. As soon as the woman tries to talk about the detailed contract, the little one interrupts her, saying it is not necessary right now. He explains he completely trusts her competence and that agreements only serve when there is a lack of faith between parties. Surprised by the boy's attitude, the merchant states he is truly a very unique and special person in the world. Then the assistant brings in a heavy box containing the promised investment funds to seal the great deal. Opening the chest, the blonde widens her eyes in total shock at the amount of gold she sees right at that moment. The redhead handed over more than 500 coins as thanks for the sincerity shown by her merchant guild. With this, she tries to revise the official document, but the hero stops her, guaranteeing that amount is correct now. The little warrior reflects on how the woman treated him with respect despite his appearance as an inexperienced child. At that moment, the blonde asks which military unit the graduate will be sent to after finishing that tough training. The protagonist reveals he is heading west to serve in the dangerous neocolites unit near the dark and deadly forest. Horrified, she asks if he volunteered, and the boy states the best recruit chooses his own royal destiny. Mockingly, the redhead jokes if he perishes, the entire investment will go to her guild as a gift. But the woman gets angry and says she does not like that kind of mean joke involving the lives of her business partners. The hero realizes that beneath that sweetness lies a very sharp and dangerous investor when it comes to serious matters. Then the merchant wants to know his departure date, and the boy answers he will leave the military center in just 3 days. With this, she promises to use the capital excellently and says goodbye to the young man with a very respectful and firm look. The blonde says goodbye, and the redhead thinks his investment problem was finally successfully resolved for now. With that, the hero decides to enjoy the last 3 days before heading to the dreaded forest by eating everything. We see the boy enjoying meats and drinks until he falls asleep from so much accumulated exhaustion from the weeks of hard training. On the day of departure, the protagonist walks through the woods with a map in hand, ready to find his new royal destination. At that moment, the young man checks his backpack and realizes he already packed everything necessary to survive the danger. Suddenly, the redhead senses something moving behind the trees and turns quickly, going on high alert on the trail. Then the giant Kyle appears with a huge load on his back, laughing and recalling they would see each other very soon. The protagonist is in disbelief seeing his friend there and asks if the veteran really did what he is thinking right now. With a firm gesture, the big guy states their bond did not end at camp and their friendship remains strong there. The muscular guy reveals he also signed up for the neocolites unit and hugs the redhead, promising to fight together in the woods. With this, the two comrades start walking toward the dense forest to begin their new phase of service. But the veteran suddenly stops and grabs the hero, warning someone is approaching the group at high speed. The merchant Deal reappears, saying she is relieved not to have arrived too late to find them in the woods. The little hero asks the reason for the visit and looks curiously at the luxurious carriage parked right in the middle of the trail. She explains the unit is very far, and so she prepared that comfortable transport for the young men to travel well. Furthermore, the lady says she put extra food and supplies inside, and the redhead questions such kindness right now. With a smile, the blonde says this is just a small token of gratitude for the sincerity the boy showed earlier. The woman states her guild always pays its debts, and says she spent the last 2 days preparing every detail. Kyle is impressed by her generosity, while the merchant asks them to be very careful on their solo mission. She mentions this is just part of a larger investment and suggests they will have much more help in the near future. The protagonist chuckles softly, thinking she does not know how to lie properly, but admits he finds her a very interesting person. Then the youth say goodbye to the blonde and go on their way, while she watches the departure of the kingdom's new soldiers. At that moment, the redhead climbs into the transport and gets ready for the long journey that will take them to the western borders soon. The merchant watches the vehicle disappear among the trees, hoping her protagonist returns safe and sound from there. The carriage travels down dirt roads toward the fortress of Urkel, crossing mountains and dry valleys. Inside the vehicle, the big guy complains about the excessive bouncing, while the hero notes it would be much worse walking there. Arriving at the garrison, the boy realizes they are in Urkel but finds it strange not seeing any local residents walking around. The redhead assumes the people are hiding because of the monsters or perhaps working in the Bronzelian forest. We discover the region's inhabitants survive by harvesting a medicinal herb called a mancho inside the dense woods. This plant is poisonous and causes sickness if touched, but when refined it becomes an extremely powerful painkiller. The redhead steps out of the carriage and notes the village is essential for the harvest, preventing residents from leaving that place. With this, the little hero stretches and calls his partner to hurry to the military base where they will serve. Then the two recruits start walking through the completely deserted and silent streets of that ghost town. At that moment, the big guy looks around very confused and wonders if that place is really their final destination. The mist reveals an old and battered fortress that looks more like an abandoned castle than a real military installation. The veteran thinks the building will collapse at any moment, while the protagonist smells a strong scent in the damp air. Soon his friend asks what is going on, and the boy replies someone is approaching them in that fog. We see mysterious shadows emerging from the thick smoke walking slowly toward the two young men. At that, they realize it is badly wounded soldiers carrying a totally battered comrade in their arms right now. One of their armors displays the worn emblem of the Neocolits unit, confirming they are members of that squad. The little warrior and the big guy watch in silence as the destroyed group passes by them with very tired expressions there. The injured men enter through the dark gates of the old fortress, disappearing into the deep darkness of the barracks. Frightened, the friend comments those guys look like ghosts, and the young warrior just sighs hearing the words. The protagonist warns he needs to get used to it, because that is a place where people fight for their lives every day. With closed eyes, the boy wonders why such an old memory decided to return to his mind right at that moment. In a past memory, we see him as an adult in armor asking his old recruits what a soldier's duty is. The rookies laugh, saying it is to destroy the enemy even if it costs their life, taking 20 opponents with them in battle. Hearing that reckless answer, the old commander lowers his head with an expression of total disappointment on his face. Then he punches the head of one of the loudmouths, who complains in pain, wanting to know the reason for that sudden aggression. The instructor turns his back and explains seriously their answer was awful because the correct thing is simply not to perish. The warrior asks them never to treat their lives as something disposable, and that the highest priority is always to survive. He reinforces true strength serves to avoid the end, while the students listen to his speech very carefully there. Back in the present, the redhead gives a sad smile, remembering that despite that warning, all his soldiers ended up passing on. With that, the hero resumes walking and calls his partner to enter the military base, leaving the muscular guy a bit apprehensive. The boy reminds his colleague they came there to get stronger and standing outside is just a waste of time. But the veteran argues the mood inside must be terrible after seeing those wounded men and suggests waiting a bit. Completely ignoring the warning, the little recruit keeps moving toward the dark gate without looking back now. Left alone in the courtyard, the big guy curses his friend's stubbornness and runs in a hurry not to be left behind in that fog. Inside the castle, someone throws a sword and armor pieces on the floor in sheer anger, cursing the leaders of that region. A revolted soldier yells the mission failed, because instead of a few enemies they faced over 30 monsters. One of the soldiers warns their comrade's arm is badly injured, and without immediate treatment he will be expelled from the base. Expulsion is not a viable option for members of the Neocolits unit, who were sent there as a severe punishment. The criminals only have the choice of rotting in prison for the rest of their lives or fighting bravely in that daily nightmare. Furthermore, they run the constant risk of being chewed up and spit out by the dangerous creatures of that deadly forest. Angrily, one of the veterans yells that an expulsion with an injury like that would make it impossible for his friend to survive. Soon the calm leader of that squad asks them to call a doctor and also request help from a temple priest, but a warrior reminds the boss that priests charge a fortune, and their salary does not cover even a small fraction. Without hesitating, the commander throws a heavy sack with 20 gold coins on the floor, ordering them to use it all on the young man's treatment. The comrade is shocked because that money was for the boss's mother's surgery, who quickly says she got better recently. All the soldiers around are moved by that noble act and watch their captain with a look of deep gratitude. Touched by the scene, one of the men decides to toss his own coins there to help, and quickly the others do the same. At that moment, the newest recruit also offers his humble coins, leaving the stressed warrior quite annoyed. The older man scolds a rookie, telling him to save that money to buy a new pair of boots for himself. But the young man clasps his hands tightly and begs to help, because he believes his comrade got hurt because of him. The veteran calms down and praises the boy's good heart, while the leader states it will take a while and asks the doctor to hurry. The young man runs off to fulfill the order, and the captain takes the chance to ask what that boy's real age is. A guard informs him he is 18 years old, and a whole year has passed since the youngest joined the squad. The leader hopes the injured soldier can pull through, and suddenly hears someone calling his name from across the room. A panting guard warns the new recruits he had reported earlier finally arrived at the military garrison. With this, the veterans slowly turn their faces, displaying scary and tired looks because of their recent battles. The commander confesses he had completely forgotten about the rookies' arrival due to the chaos they faced in the forest. Then the boss catches the attention of the young recruit, who just returned, and the boy promptly responds to his superior's call. With a friendly smile, the leader hugs the boy's shoulder and invites him to walk alongside him through the base's hallways. He says the two of them need to go to the main room to greet the likely successors to that dangerous post. In the office, the captain observes the visitors from above and asks if they are really the new reinforcements sent by the kingdom. Analyzing the big guy, the officer concludes he looks quite useful thanks to his imposing physique and apparent strength there. But shortly after, the leader shifts his focus and casts a suspicious glance at the little redhead standing there calmly. The commander asks in shock if the boy is really only 13 years old, and the boy firmly confirms it. The boss comments the redhead is 5 years younger than their youngest and questions why a child would volunteer. Sighing heavily, the officer reads the document stating he will never be able to understand how today's youth thinks. The big guy defends his colleague, saying he was the camp's top student, and the leader questions about first place. With a serious look, the boss states that does not matter and training is completely different from that battlefield. The protagonist agrees, saying he already knows that, and the commander is surprised the young man came even with this warning. At that moment, the officer calls the squad's youngest recruit by name, and the soldier promptly responds to the call. The captain points his finger and orders the young man to show the rookies to their bunks and then make them clean the barracks. With it, the warrior turns his back and tells the two newcomers to follow him down the halls of that military base. The youths begin to walk in silence, following the guide through the barracks, rustic and poorly lit facilities. The guide explains there are no ranks in that unit, asking them to forget titles like leader or captain around there. He opens the room door, revealing the only thing that matters to define hierarchy is the order of arrival at the location. The veteran tells the two to pick any free bed, adding it will not be theirs for very long anyway. The redhead's muscular partner is confused by the dark comment and asks what the young man meant by those words. The soldier reveals he has been there for a year and is still the newest member, asking if the rookies understand the meaning of that. We see a memory of a comrade falling to the ground, hurt and screaming in pain after being brutally struck in the legs. With an expression of pure dread, the warrior sweats, cold, remembering the cruel fate of everyone who tried to serve in that place. The young man finally confesses that absolutely everyone who arrived after him ended up losing their lives on missions. The hero's partner is in shock hearing that heavy revelation, while the little warrior merely observes in silence. The guide decides to leave and tells them to clean everything first, because he will return later to explain the rest of the heavy routine. The door closes and the two comrades are left alone in the large rustic room, staring at the empty and neatly made beds. Very frustrated, the big guy sits down and complains about the soldier's behavior, while the redhead begins to chuckle softly at the situation. Annoyed, the muscular guy questions the reason for his partner's smile, who just hides it by calmly turning his back. The young man reflects happily, noting it seems his old comrade still acts exactly like in the past without changing. Then the protagonist grabs a cloth and tells his colleague to start the cleaning, leaving the brute outraged by the idea. The boy states if they need to do that boring chore, they better do the job right and without much stalling. With a big smile on his face, the little recruit hands a dirty cloth to his friend, stating this is their first mission. The friend takes the fabric, angrily yelling in indignation at being treated like a cleaning service right on his first day at the base. Meanwhile, we see the guide soldier sitting alone in the dark unit dining hall with his hands clasped very nervously. With his eyes tightly shut, the warrior confesses to himself he is very afraid of everything that is going to happen from now on. The young man remembers the terrible cycle of receiving a new colleague and ending up forming strong bonds with the warrior during combat. In the memory, he calms a scared rookie, telling him that would be a simple initial mission for his friend just to observe. With a confident look, the veteran tells the beginner to stay back to stay safe and learn how to survive on the battlefield. He remembers a battle warning that a moment of carelessness can cost a person's entire life. At that, the warrior reflects that dark environment is exactly like that, claiming many lives in the clashes. As time passed, the soldier stopped looking after the rookies, since they always end up passing away anyway. But for some unknown reason, the two new recruits bother him a lot, especially the little redhead. The veteran thinks the boy already knew him from before, while the cobbler informs him his boot repair is ready. Very grateful, the young man thanks him for the service and pays the necessary coins before taking his brand new gear. The artisan comments he saw some lost kids in front of the base and asks if they are the new beginners. The bearded man thought the boys were very useless at first, but concludes they must be the squad's freshmen. Listening to everything in silence, the warrior just grabs his things and says he will return soon, saying goodbye to the place. Walking back, the young man thinks about those rookies and decides he needs to break their pride quickly. He firmly believes things like motivation and confidence only cause people to lose their lives in the forest. Opening the wooden door, the veteran peeks inside, hoping they did not fail the big cleanup. Suddenly, the military man widens his eyes, standing in total shock at what he just witnessed in the barracks. With a dirty face, the protagonist gives a friendly smile, welcoming his colleague, who finally returned from his stroll. The room is sparkling clean, with the boy holding a mop while the big guy is still wiping the floor in the back. Other soldiers approach impressed and ask how hard he pushed the rookies to leave everything shining. Very frightened and sweating cold, the warrior denies doing anything, guaranteeing he was not hard on anyone. The hero shows the grimy bucket and announces they finished the cleaning, asking the veteran to check if anything is missing. The young man is left speechless because people usually pretend they tidy up and suspects a strange behavior. The soldier analyzes the situation with apprehension and imagines this is a very intelligent rebellion from the new duo. At that, the squad commander appears in the room laughing very loudly upon seeing the environment so perfect. The boss praises the excellent work, saying that space now looks like a newly opened military base. The subordinates are perplexed to see their leader laughing, since he is known for never showing emotions there. With a calmer expression, the captain calls the two youths to approach him in the center of the large room. The superior wants to know if they were really the ones who sanitized every corner in there, and the boy confirms very firmly. Curious, the leader asks the reason for that extreme dedication, since the two could have just pretended to work. The raidhead replies it was a direct order from the veteran, and the duo merely obeyed the superior's initial command. The officer reflects that after spending a lot of time in dangerous clashes, he can judge people perfectly. He notes the sweating brute in the back could enter real combat with just basic training, but he confesses he cannot read the hero and wonders why the academy's top student would choose to suffer so much. At that, the captain reflects there must be a great reason for this and asks everyone to listen to his words. Then the officer walks over to the rookies and puts his arm around the young men, leaving the other warrior quite confused. With a smile, the boss announces the two are the newest members of the squad from today on, asking for a warm welcome. Lying in bed, his partner asks the redhead when all that terrible conflict will finally come to an end. With a serious look, the hero replies very calmly that everything will end quickly if they decide to surrender. Closing his eyes, his companion asks in a very serene voice for his friend to guarantee he will not perish before him. The protagonist finds his colleagues talk strange, and the veteran just says there is no reason asking him to promise it. At that, the boy remembers he did not give an answer back then, but in a way he ended up keeping his promise. We see a tragic memory showing his old partner fallen with several swords struck in his back in the battle. With a look full of pain, the hero recalls the terrible moment he lost his great friend in the war. That happened because the little warrior managed to survive much longer than his squad comrade. Back in the present, the protagonist wakes up suddenly in the middle of the night and curses in frustration because of the memory. Rubbing his head, the boy concludes he will not be able to sleep and decides to practice his mana cultivation method. So the young warrior leaves the dark barracks and walks quietly toward the base's dark forest. Suddenly, the hero notices a strange movement from afar and wonders who would be training so late at night. Looking closer, the boy realizes it is the guide soldier swinging an incredibly heavy sword in the dark. Hiding in the shadows, the redhead thinks the young man was already a fanatic for hard training since that era. The boy does not understand why the guy uses a weapon that has terrible compatibility with his strength and speed. With a smile, the protagonist remembers that in the past, it took the veteran a long time to change his weapon following advice. In the morning, the recruits observe huge mountains, and one soldier complains they will have a very heavy endurance drill. Bored waiting for the captain, one of the veterans suggests making a bet to see if the rookies will last through training. Several men bet 10 and 20 silver coins, thinking the new duo will not be able to finish the training session. The big guy is outraged, noticing the bet, and questions how those men can underestimate the rookies like that. Analyzing the scene, the little hero assumes the group is used to this and finds the unit's atmosphere very peculiar. Surprising his muscular friend, the redhead walks toward the betting circle, leaving his colleague quite confused by this. With a curious expression, the boy approaches the veterans and asks if he can also participate in that little game. The soldiers are startled by the sudden arrival of the child and mockingly ask if the freshman has money to spend. The protagonist confirms he has cash but says he would like to change the rules of the game a bit, and the soldier asks how. Showing a gold coin, the young man guarantees he will beat all the warriors present and take first place in the drill. Glaring at the little warrior with a challenging smile, the group asks if he would like to add any other condition. One of the men finds the freshman's fighting spirit amusing and promises to hand over all that money if the boy wins the race. But in a threatening tone, the veteran warns if the redhead loses, he will have to wash all their clothes for an entire month. Since washing clothes took the place of losing a gold coin, the protagonist asks to add one more rule to the big bet. The hero asks for a month of free time from training if he wins the bet, and the other soldiers think he is talking nonsense. At that moment, the captain calmly accepts the bet, leaving one of the veterans quite shocked by his boss's permission there. Then the squad commander turns his head and calls the guide soldier by name, so he also joins the big game. With an excited smile on his face, the leader tells the youngest soldier to enter the dispute with his camp comrades. The young man is apprehensive, and the boss mocks him, asking if he is so afraid of losing to a simple freshman in the race. Bothered, the warrior denies being afraid and explains he just thinks it is a waste of money entering a game with such an obvious result. Without hesitating, the officer tosses a coin to his subordinate and says he will pay his entry fee with his own money. With this, the leader turns to the red-haired rookie and promises to give the free month if the boy actually beats all the veterans. But with a scary tone, the commander threatens to give an extra hellish training session to any older warrior who happens to lose. The men get furious at the freshman's arrogance and decide to use every drop of strength in the training to crush that boy. The little warrior lowers his head, satisfied, thinking the plan worked because his real goal was not just the free time. He notes he needs to change that squad's rotten atmosphere, since living without hope ends up destroying everything around a person. Then the strong captain stands facing the huge rocky mountain and firmly announces the start of physical training. Pointing to a pile of wood, the man orders everyone to run carrying those heavy logs to the top of the mountain. The soldiers start complaining a lot about that change in normal routine, but the leader yells, telling the whole group to shut up. Annoyed, the officer orders them to grab the wood quickly and stop whining like a bunch of scared little boys. With that, the guys begin to climb the extremely difficult terrain, carrying the weight on their backs with great difficulty and exhaustion. We see one of the veterans sweating profusely as he tries to keep up the pace of the climb, feeling his muscles burn with that effort. A warrior watches the leader up on the rock and wonders what the big reason is for that sudden change in today's training. The panting comrade concludes it was all the rookie's fault and bets the boys will pass out halfway up the hard path. At that moment, the man looks to the back of the group, expecting to see the little hero falling to the ground, but does not find the boy. Very confused, the man widens his large eyes and lifts his head, suspecting what the freshman actually just did there. The soldier is in disbelief, seeing the redhead jumping over the rocks way ahead, and wonders when the boy managed to climb so fast. Leading the group comfortably, the hero lets out a small sigh of relief as he carries the huge wooden log on his back. The young man looks admiringly at his silver ring, noting the item's magic can even reduce the weight of objects held. With a beautiful smile, the protagonist reflects he made an excellent choice, getting that powerful magic support ring. Soon the redhead stops on a very high rock and looks back, wondering what part of the course the veterans are currently at. He notices the men fell far behind on the climb and notes only one single soldier managed to keep up the pace. We see the calm squad guide, totally sweaty, carrying his heavy wood, with an expression of great determination on his face. The panting warrior looks up toward the top of the great mountain, glaring at the rookie who waits calmly up there. With his face covered in sweat, the guide deduces the rookie should arrive soon and waits for him with great determination and exhaustion. Suddenly, a soldier runs desperately toward the strong commander, warning that something serious just happened there. Very agitated, the man points to the roof of the military barracks, asking the boss to look quickly in that direction. Seeing the scene, the squad leader widens his eyes and is completely shocked by the image that appears before him. A huge red flag is waving on top of the building, indicating a situation of extreme high-level emergency. Several warriors watch the castle with great apprehension and fear, realizing a serious crisis is approaching the location. At that, the officer walks hurriedly through the halls and questions the reason for raising the extreme danger warning. The subordinate warns some herb gatherers suffered casualties in the forest, and this occurred in a restricted area. Very irritated, the man complains about the group's stubbornness and tries to find out the scale of the damage and the type of monster spotted. But the assistant reports the workers went in with 6 mercenaries, and the boss is indignant at the lack of details. With this, the experienced leader asks how many soldiers are ready to fight and discovers only 70 men remain. Then he orders them to pull out the wounded and gather about 50 healthy warriors as quickly as possible at the camp. Resting his face in his hands, the captain realizes the frequency of missions has increased and suspects the woods are changing. Soon the fighters organize in the large courtyard under the sunlight, confirming everyone is present and prepared. The commander shouts, ordering the entire squad to grab their weapons and prepare to march toward the dreaded confrontation. At that moment, the young recruit approaches, asking permission to participate in the grand mission alongside the big guy. The superior firmly denies the request, claiming real combat is too dangerous, and orders the duo to stay in the barracks. The boy argues they can help by carrying things in the rear and brings up the good strength shown in the last training session. Sighing from exhaustion, the leader closes his eyes, finding it pitiful to need the support of rookies there. He finally authorizes the 2 boys to go on the condition they do not enter the battle and only carry the equipment. With that, the officer turns his back and orders the military guide to hand the heavy bags to the pair of helpers. The redhead grabs the heavy sack with his comrade and begins to suspect the things he will hear from the veteran about those woods. In a past memory, the older recruit reveals very seriously that a powerful dark entity exists in the forest. The little hero finds that totally absurd, but the soldier assures him the creature was no ordinary monster from the area. The guide reports seeing with his own eyes an orc possessed by a dark force destroying a fierce metal wolf. He clenches his hands in anger, recalling they would need 5 normal orcs just to have a chance, and had to flee. The warrior shows a bitter expression, guaranteeing his unit would never be dismantled if it were not for that. Back in the present, the redhead carries the supplies, feeling a strong headache from being unable to organize his thoughts. At that, the boy decides the only viable alternative right now is to accompany the platoon as a carrier and see everything up close. Finally, the great commander asks if everyone packed their things properly, and the entire squad confirms loudly. The captain walks around advising his men to consider all possibilities and avoid extreme dangers. With a serious look, the leader reinforces that everyone's top priority there is to make it back from the mission alive. Then the battalion begins marching out of the castle, while the young redhead sighs in relief for finally taking action. At that moment, the hero gives a small, excited smile, thinking that will be his first real combat on the team. Once in the dense forest, the commander orders them to search the area in trios without wandering too far from the main group. The experienced officer tells the 2 rookies to follow him very closely, and the little warrior promptly confirms the order. Walking through the restricted area, the boy looks around confused because the environment looks just like a very ordinary woods. But suddenly the freshman feels a chill run down his spine, noting the atmosphere there feels like a war zone. Having fought for his life in the past, the protagonist quickly realizes all his senses are on full alert. Gripping his staff tightly, the recruit is absolutely certain that dark place is incredibly dangerous. Suddenly, a very strange noise echoes through the trees, making the entire squad halt their march immediately. With that, the group boss runs hurriedly toward the sound, wanting to know if the scouts found something important. Soon, one of the desperate subordinates screams, calling the captain, who approaches quickly with the helpers right behind. The scene revealed is a complete tragedy, with several victims fallen on the ground, showing the total brutality of the attack. Inspecting the left-behind weapons, the commander deduces the men fled, consumed by immense fear. Looking at huge trees snapped in half, the leader tries to imagine what kind of powerful creature caused so much damage. A guard suggests the culprit is a giant bear, but the superior states local animals would not do that. The same young man asks in fear if it might be a dangerous ogre, and the experienced warrior denies that possibility as well. While the men try to understand the mysterious situation, the little hero turns his head, noticing something strange in the woods. The young recruit walks over to a bush and finds the massive carcass of a red bear lying near the large trees. Analyzing the beast's terrible wounds, the redhead notes the claw marks point to a predator of colossal size. At that, Demian points to the destroyed trunks, stating an immense creature would explain all that destruction there. Impressed, the officer praises the boy's perfect analysis and asks where he learned to track clues so well. The boy plays it off, saying his father was a skilled hunter, and the commander praises his new freshman's cleverness. However, his muscular colleague is quite confused, remembering hearing his friend say earlier that his father was a soldier. With a very lethal look, the protagonist makes the brute shut up immediately so he does not ruin his lie. Decisively, the leader announces everyone will return to base and orders the careful recovery of the fallen bodies for their families. The hero mentally agrees, thinking it would be madness to advance knowing absolutely nothing about the terrible enemy. Smiling, the young man reflects the boss is rude but quite excellent, understanding why his old guide admired him so much. Then the strong officer yells for the entire squad to hurry up and start the long march back to the safe camp. Suddenly, the protagonist turns around, startled, feeling something very dangerous is about to happen in that place. At that, the young recruit runs, screaming desperately for everyone to be very careful with what comes next. Immediately, a giant rock falls from the sky, smashing the ground and sending the soldiers flying from the sheer force. A warrior gets trapped and cries out in pain, while his partner wonders where on earth that huge rock came from. Very afraid, the little hero calls for his big friend, who runs quickly toward the area of the terrible impact. Without hesitating, the brute uses all his monstrous strength to hold the giant rock with his own calloused hands. The protagonist also steps in to help, pushing the stone with the aid of his bright and mysterious purple magic. Together, the two comrades make an absurd effort, planting their feet firmly on the ground to hold back the colossal weight of the stone. Then the commander tells everyone to help push the rock away so they can rescue the trapped soldier from under the trap. With the whole group's effort, the wounded warrior is finally pulled out, feeling a lot of pain in his right leg. The captain analyzes the injured young man's situation while the red-haired boy approaches, handing over a small healing herb. The young recruit tells the wounded man to chew the plant thoroughly to extract the juice, warning this will help ease the pain. Startled, the leader warns that leaf is poisonous and eating it without any care can cause a terrible effect right now. But the boy shows some seeds and explains they neutralize the poison, telling his colleague to chew everything very fast. While the injured man chews the mix, the superior is very impressed by the vast knowledge of that poor child. Urgently, the hero warns the platoon needs to fall back right now because the rock did not fall by itself and was thrown by something. Before the boy finishes speaking, a deafening sound of heavy footsteps shakes the entire ground of that ancient woods. A gigantic bestial creature with red eyes emerges from the shadows, leaving the battalion in total shock. The warriors begin to back away, terrified, stating they have never seen a black bear of such absurd size in their lives. Recognizing the immense imminent risk, the brave leader lets out a powerful shout, ordering everyone to prepare to fight. Quickly, the soldiers draw their swords and spears, pointing at the beast and showing they are ready for the confrontation. Giving the group no time to think, the colossal monster charges with great fury, attacking with a very devastating swipe. The officer tells the warriors to dodge, and the attack grazes by destroying the trees as if they were mere twigs. Acting fast, the commander tells them to move the wounded to the rear, directing the squad to focus on the giant target's legs. The captain calls upon one of his trusted men, who leaps bravely with his axe, securing the first hit. Letting out a loud battle cry, the experienced combatant swings the heavy weapon with all his brute force in the air. The sharp blade hits the animal squarely, spraying around in the middle of that fierce mortal combat. But the warrior, startled, noting the strike was not deep enough despite his ability to cut down orcs. Seeing the creature prepare to retaliate, the boss yells the soldier's name, telling him to focus quickly to dodge. After a cut in the scene, we see the redhead being called by the leader in the barracks main room, receiving direct orders there. At that, the commander stares at the recruit, asking if he knows anything about that black, spotted monster from the forest. Then the young redhead replies very calmly that he believes the beast ended up corrupted by a terrible dark energy. Startled, the captain asks if that is the same power used by dark mages, and the boy simply confirms the suspicion. With this, the officer deduces there are wicked sorcerers in the woods. Remembering this kind of dark magic is totally forbidden, but the recruit explains it is impossible to be sure right now. It could be either a mage or an aberration full of that bad energy. This sinister energy is borrowed from dark entities, and anyone exposed to it for too long ends up meeting a tragic fate. The boy remembers this forest possessed a corrupted mana stone, doubting it should appear this early. At that, he recalls the existence of this crystal would only be revealed to the world after a major future event that would shake the empire. At that moment, the protagonist widens his eyes, suspecting all of this is actually just the beginning of something very terrible. Since corruption grows stronger over time, affecting more monsters, he deduces the best option is to destroy the source of it all soon. Curious, the leader asks how the rookie knows so much about the subject, and he lies, saying he heard from his father about an old case. The experienced warrior becomes very interested in the story and says he would love to hear more details about all this. Desperate for help, the officer leans over the table to listen closely as the rookie soldier begins telling his story. Later, we see the large military base from the outside, hearing someone complain of severe body pain due to exhaustion. In the room, the warriors try to wake up their lazy colleagues, stating the previous day's mission drained all their energy there. Suddenly, another recruit throws the room door wide open, shouting, excitedly wanting to know if the group had heard the big news. He announces the forest is on total lockdown, prohibiting entry to any warrior or even the simple gatherers. With this break in missions, they will have time to train and rest, which is a huge stroke of luck since many were hurt in the woods. The big guy notices the redhead's weird face, asking if he did not like the news, and the boy plays it off, saying he thought it was good. He rubs his own face in frustration, knowing the break came at a good time for the platoon to heal, regretting it was right now. At that moment, heavy footsteps echo down the hallway, grabbing the attention of the whole group, who wonder who those guys might be. Through the crack, they spy some important garrison guards walking by, finding the presence of those men very strange. Shortly after, we see the leader of those guards sitting with his arms crossed, maintaining a very serious and intimidating posture. The base captain gets up from his chair, glaring at those unexpected visitors, asking the reason for coming to his battalion. The man says thanks to their report, the temple decided to cooperate, confirming they sensed a malicious aura in the beast's carcass. At that, the officer realizes his rookie recruit was right about the case, suspecting even more about that energy in the Great Woods. The guard explains nothing is certain, deciding to send a priest soon to start a search operation, joining the two troops. The visitor states because it isn't a typical problem, they need to bring along a warrior with good knowledge on the subject. Worried, the captain tries to defend the red-haired boy, reminding him he is a simple recruit with no experience, risking falling easily. But the visitor fires back, demanding the hero, and the boss knows a refusal would bring huge punishments for his entire battered battalion. At that, the captain calls a trusted guard, asking the man to carry out a very simple order. He tells the soldier to go get young Damian, who gets out of bed, keeping a very serious and focused expression. At that moment, we see a small flashback where the recruit states he must not lose the favor he just earned. During the forest battle, the experienced warrior uses his axe to attack the dangerous dark creature head-on, but the powerful giant monster retaliates very quickly, landing a heavy blow to the poor distracted fighter's face. With the strong impact, the man is thrown very far away, shattering his shield into several pieces on the dirt ground. The beast slowly advances toward the wounded soldier, who groans in pain, trying to crawl through the brush to escape. Showing no mercy, the creature raises its colossal paw, preparing the final strike to crush its poor prey's head. But the brave captain appears at the exact moment, defending against the absurd swipe with his sword and struggling with the immense pressure. The leader realizes 3 of his men are hurt, promising he will not let that bizarre thing leave there alive. Gathering all his strength, the official lets out a fierce yell, ordering all his soldiers to keep attacking immediately. Quickly, the entire troop charges, surrounding the large animal and thrusting their sharp spears relentlessly into the giant target. A large warrior steps in front of the redhead, telling the rookie to fall back to stay safe and far from the lethal danger. Acting fast, the commander calls a soldier by name, directing the man to strike directly at the furious bear's side. The lackey leaps swiftly, delivering a precise cut to the beast's furry arm, tearing deeply into mystical being's skin. Feeling great pain, the abomination lets out a terrifying roar, completely losing its balance in the middle of that combat there. Seizing this opening, the powerful leader readies his shining blade, charging at the large stunned monster. Showing his cold and determined look, the hero glares at the giant target, declaring that confrontation is over right there. Very surprised, the young boy watches everything in fear, noting a strong presence of intense magic in that isolated area. In the blink of an eye, the veteran brings down the glowing strike, hitting the macabre animal, driving the huge sword into its center. The troop celebrates the end of that nightmare, kicking the fallen body, saying nothing beats a beautiful joint attack. The commander analyzes the black carcass, stating he has never seen anything so abnormal, wondering where the beast came from. And soon the man notices something bizarre, touching the furry skin, seeing some black spots scattered across the pre's back. A soldier approaches, asking if this is contagious, recalling victims of certain plagues get similar marks. The redhead watches the group talking and examines the creature, confirming those really were the supposed dark spots. And the experienced hunter realizes there is only one way a filthy aberration like that could have appeared in that calm forest. Worried, the young boy knows he needs to act quickly to find out where the weird bear lived before the attack. Soon the boss orders the group to stand guard, asking a warrior to tear off the massive hide and craft a strong armor. But the brave recruit decides to interrupt the order, warning the troop should not use the being's dirty and smelly leather. Surprised, the commander looks back, glaring at the little boy, questioning the real meaning of that big, unexpected warning. At that, the leader states he already figured the young man knew something, and the recruit simply nods his head, confirming it all. Then the captain tells them to leave the skin behind, announcing everyone is going back, grabbing the freshman's attention immediately. With it, the boss demands that the boy follow his steps immediately, while the entire squad begins to leave the forest.